What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome to my mega tier list video. In this video, I'll be ranking all 139 unique weapons in Borderlands 2. In some ways, my channel has always been building up to this, as a core function of it has always been to show that most weapons are UVHM viable. Strangely, when I try to show people that most weapons are still good, they sometimes refuse to even watch my videos or get defensive. This is weird because you'd think people would be happy to see their favorite weapons do well on OP10. In extreme cases, they even accuse me of cheating or call me slurs. Now, I have had some people who have had their opinions changed by my content, who have learned and grown and become great players, and I really appreciate those people. Maybe I'm overestimating how many weapons are still good on OP10. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the community just doesn't like me. My content was suggested to Killer6 at one point on Reddit because he kept saying that you can't play base UVHM even without a Moxie weapon. So he cherry-picked one video where I used a Ruby and used that to invalidate my entire channel. Well, that's okay. I'm sure at least Fishman likes me, right?
Okay, guys, this is going to be my live Garnet Anarchist reaction. Average features.
Damn, well, sorry to disappoint you, Fishman, but I'll work with what I got.
Am I hot right now?
Why would I or anyone else think that you're hot right now? I can't impregnate you.
Well, maybe Man of One World Fibber likes me, right? Like, people have said that my content is similar to his. Some people speculated that I was his alt before the face reveal, or maybe even with the face reveal, maybe I'm him after facial reconstructive surgery. Could be, right? I'm sure he at least likes my content. He did show up to one of my live streams. Game starts a little slow. Oh, it's Man of One World Fibber. A lot of people have speculated that I'm you trying to come back with an alt account. And unfortunately, Fibber is a white supremacist, so I cannot really engage with him. I just had to block Fibber. No white supremacists allowed here. But yeah, Fibber, if you ever rehabilitate yourself, I would appreciate that. I would support you. I'm sure he at least likes my content. Okay, wow, well, that is half right. I do believe in racial equality. Maybe I'm overestimating how many weapons are still good on OP10. So let's rank them all and see if that's the case. Since people say you have to play UVHM with a Grog Nozzle and a B shield, we'll review every weapon on OP10 with no B shield, no Grog Nozzle, and no badass rank. We do have a Discord server if you'd like to join that. It is called the Gemstone Gang. I will link it in the description. It's also in my channel description, so feel free to come out. Just don't be an asshole. Finally, let's just go over the criteria of the list before diving in. I am considering overall performance and utility across all characters: mobbing, bossing, and raid bossing. Weapons which perform better across many situations will generally be higher, with weapons that are also good at raiding being regarded the highest, as raiding is by far the hardest part of the game with the least amount of viable gear, and anything that is good at raiding is usually really good outside of raiding as well. A weapon being in a lower tier doesn't even mean it cannot be good, it just means it is good in fewer situations. If a weapon has equal damage but better range, it could be higher. If a weapon has equal damage and also has healing, it could be higher. If a weapon has equal damage but horrible ammo efficiency, it might be lower. SS tier: meta monsters that excel on most characters in most situations and even have raiding potential or provide some unmatched utility. S tier: amazing weapons, great in many situations, but lacking the raiding potential or sheer utility of SS weapons. A tier: strong weapons, good in many situations, but lacking the raw power, utility, or versatility of S tier weapons. B tier: decent weapons which can be strong in the right situation, but require more specific characters or scenarios to perform well. C tier: mediocre weapons that struggle outside of very niche circumstances or setups. These weapons can still be good, but in more limited situations. D tier: near universally useless weapons. Unless being completely carried by a build, these weapons will struggle in 99% of situations. I will be ranking weapons considering their element matched capacity, so for example, the Greed will be considered how it performs versus flesh targets, not armored targets. I will not be punishing weapons that are hard to get either, so the Norfleet is not going to be D tier simply because it's hard to get. By the way, for right now, I'm going to roughly rank the weapons within the tiers, but for the most part, I'm not doing that. We'll take another look at the end, and once I can see how every weapon is ranked, I'll be able to make a better informed decision so we can move things around a little bit at the end. For the most part, right now, I'm just going to try to get them in the right tiers themselves. I also want to be clear, I did a ridiculous amount of playtesting to rank these weapons, as well as taking community feedback. That said, it is clear some people were voting with their hearts over their brains, or that people just often lacked experience with the weapons they were ranking, but I conducted multiple tests on multiple characters over and over again against bosses and mobs, so feel free to share your opinion, but make sure it's informed if you want it to be taken seriously. This is considering OP10 performance. That's where the game is the hardest, and it's where this information is the most relevant. I tried to mention if weapons were element locked or not, though I may have missed some. I tried to mention which weapons have unlisted projectiles for B abuse, but just in case I forgot, here's all of them. Bekah, Conference Call, Creamer, Fibber, Godfinger, Hive, Interfacer, Leadstorm, Lyuda, Mongol, Pimpernel, Pitchfork, Sandtalk, Sawbar, Storm, Toothpick, and Unkempt Herald. I'll also link to Dahlminator's splash guide in the description if you want to check that out. In general, there are 3 splash types: Gun Splash, which Maya boosts, Grenade Splash, which Axton and Krieg boost, and Pure Splash, which Krieg can boost. I'll show all those on screen right now. I got some help from Mr. TX01 with Krieg, but as I said, I'll link the splash guide. Just remember, green means Grenade Splash, yellow means Gun Splash, and blue means Pure Splash. Or even simpler, green means Axton, yellow means Maya, blue means Krieg. Alright, with all of that said, let's get into the list. Alright, first up the 12 pounder. So this is obtained from Big Sleep at a 33% rate. He is found in the Captain Scarlet DLC. So the 12 pounder fires a bouncing cannonball, and it's got a very small blast radius. It's pretty good for mobbing. It's decent for bossing on the right character. It's got a limited ammo pool being a rocket launcher though. You also have worse movement speed with rocket launchers, so that is something to keep in mind. You slow down a little bit. It's got a pretty bad blast radius. It's explosive locked, so no element matching, no Bone of the Ancients. I wish it was like a one-shot mag, high damage, like really long reload speed. It is a ton of fun on Zero with one-shot, one kill, and killer, and it's pretty good. Overall, I think B tier is fair for the 12-pounder. All right, up next is the Actualizer. So this drops from Hyperius at a 0.29% rate, and it is also obtainable from the Oasis Seraph Vendor, and unless otherwise stated, anything from a Seraph Vendor costs 120 Seraph Crystals. So the Actualizer has better damage, magazine size, but worse bullet speed and reload speed versus the non-unique version. It's pretty underrated. It hits pretty hard. It's got a long reload that does hurt the overall DPS, though in practice, reload speed skills and the high damage kind of sidestep this. The initial inaccuracy is very bad, although a Hyperion Allegiance Relic can help with that a lot. I do have a full review of this and many other weapons, guys. I've got a full playlist of over like 80 Borderlands 2 weapon reviews that I'll link to if you want to check that out. It does come in all elements, and it's sort of a side grade to the Bitch. Overall, I would say the Bitch is better, but the Actualizer does have better single shot damage. It'll mainly drop off because of the initial inaccuracy and the long reload, but overall it's very comparable. Depending on the situation, it could even be better. But overall, it is kind of an easier to obtain but slightly worse Bitch. I would give it low A tier. All right, up next is the Ahab. Now this drops from Master Yi at a 33.3% rate, and it shoots a harpoon that deals non-elemental damage, so it doesn't deal explosive damage. So an explosive relic will not boost it. I would recommend using a launcher, Heart of the Ancients, with it. Honestly, like damage-wise, it can be B tier, but small radius, no element or bone bonus, low ammo pool, bad range, small mag, long reload. It's got a lot of things working against it, even though it does have high damage. I think it has the highest listed damage value, so I think there's some Salvador glitch stuff you can do with it. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but overall, I think it's a C tier weapon for sure. All right, up next is the Amigo Sincero. So this is a quest reward for completing BFFFs in the Commander Lilith DLC, and it completely ignores shields. It'll just completely bypass them. It is a power crept trespasser, so it's got massive damage, massive single shot damage, and it also has a high fire rate. It is the best one-shot, one-kill sniper if you don't want to deal with like Pimpernel sweet spotting or Godfinger fighting from 3 zip codes away. If you just want amazing single-shot damage, no gimmicks, it's the Amigo Sincero. It's good for mobbing, it's good for bossing. It even has raid utility because you can use it to knock off Pete's face shield. You can use it to kill the Chieftain in the Veracitus fight. It's actually pretty good for killing Pyro Pete, particularly on Zero, but even not with Zero, if you just use like a B shield with your Amigo Sincero, you can actually kill Pete fairly easily on all characters. It's not going to be the fastest method, but it's pretty easy. Either S tier or SS tier. It does have the rating potential, which I think I'm going to allow to bump this up to SS tier because, again, there's just not a lot of stuff that does have raid potential. So I think for that alone, and considering how good it is even without that, I think I will give it SS tier. I mean, Veracitus is by far the hardest fight in the entire franchise, so having utility to help with that fight is massive. All right, up next is going to be the Avenger. So the Avenger does drop from the binary boss at a 12.5% rate. Remember, the binary boss does not spawn until OP5 though. It also drops from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate. Oh my god. It also drops from Loot Midgets at a 0.365% rate. Now guys, some of those drop odds change depending on the playthrough and the level. All of the drop odds that I reference will be for level 80 and Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. I'm going to link to Loot Lemon in the description. Get used to checking Loot Lemon, guys. They've got all the information you would need. I'm just going to try to give you a general overview here. But the Avenger is actually pretty good as a standard gun. It's a pretty underrated weapon. Now, it obviously has great chucking damage. You can use it for Hyperius and Veracitus. It's hard to use elsewhere because it doesn't explode on contact for some reason, which is kind of frustrating. Now, before the OP10 update, of course, it could insta-kill Hyperius and Veracitus. Axton could do chuck kills with it and instantly kill them. Now, infamously, with the OP10 update, Hyperius and Veracitus were both glitched into having double health. So now the Avenger cannot kill them, although it can still deal a huge amount of damage to them. I think it can deal almost half of their health if you're, perfect with it. On top of that, it does regen ammo, and it's just pretty underrated. It was power crept by the Infection Cleaner, except the Avenger comes in all elements while the Infection Cleaner is firelocked. It's hard to say overall. It does also regen SMG ammo. I don't know if I mentioned that. Considering the ammo regen, the raid niche, the decent damage, I think it does deserve A tier. I mean, honestly, as a standard weapon, it is really good on Maya and Zero. But all things together, I think it deserves at least A tier, arguably S tier. I may end up changing my mind on that one because, again, the utility with Hyperius and Veracitus, I mean, to take over half of about half of Veracitus health on OP10 is a big deal. So that could be S tier. I'm gonna go A tier for now, but in the end, I may change my mind on that. All right, up next is the Baby Maker. So this drops from Madame von Bartlesby at a 10% rate, and it does also world drop. Now, this is really good for awkward enemies. Some of these chucking weapons are really good for them, and by that, I mean stuff like Witch Doctors or Skeletons in Dragon Keep, that kind of thing. Any kind of enemy who's harder to use a conventional gun build on, this can be very good for. So it's a highly versatile weapon. It does come in every element, and it does get grenade damage bonuses, as all TDR chucks do. You do have to be a little bit careful not to kill yourself with it. If you chuck like super close up, you can kill yourself. And it's actually also decent as a straight shooting gun. So good, really great chuck. Whenever you throw it, it has a random chance to drop 1 to 3 additional Baby Makers. So if it drops all 3 Baby Makers on the reload chuck, it deals massive damage. It usually won't drop all 3, but it's still usually a very good weapon for chucking. Now, I actually got my first ever Godfinger when recording footage for this weapon, so shout out Baby Maker for giving me my first Godfinger. So it's easily A tier, if not arguably S tier. The community poll was split between A and S tier. I'm kind of having a hard time. I'm going to go A tier right now, but I do think you could probably argue S tier. I may end up changing my mind. For the most part, I'm only going to mention the community polls if like there's something in particular worth mentioning, but I'll talk about that more at the end. If we all just agreed, I probably won't mention it. All right, next up is the Bad Touch. So for the first Moxie tip, you have a much higher chance to get this, or I think you're guaranteed to get it on the first Moxie tip. After the first Moxie tip, it becomes much, much more rare. So do be aware of that. Now, the Bad Touch is corrosive locked, of course. It does heal for 2% of the damage you deal, so that's really nice. Any kind of healing is nice on OP10 because your health doesn't go up in OP levels, but your damage does. So even a 2% amount of healing is still really, really high. It also has a plus 70% critical hit modifier. Now, the damage is a little underwhelming depending on the character. Maya and Zero are both really good with it, but the healing and the damage together, I think, does make it deserve to be B tier. Like I said, the damage is not amazing, but considering the healing and how good the damage is on Zero and Maya in particular, I'm going to give it low B tier. All right, up next we have the Badaboom, baby. So this drops from King Wong at a 5% rate, and it also world drops. So Hatterax is a great way to get anything that world drops like this, guys. I highly recommend learning to farm him. I've got a ton of Badabooms from Hatterax. Now, with the Badaboom, oh man, there's so much to talk about. It's got you can get a low-level version to do rocket jumps. You can skip the entire Digistruct Peak. You can do a lot of other skips. It does come in every element. It's also highly ammo efficient. It's a top 5 DPS rocket launcher. It's also great for regenning rocket ammo. You can shoot it like once if you have a sham and regen like 6 ammo. It honestly deserves S tier for the damage, the ammo efficiency, and the rocket jumping utility. I think I'm actually going to bump it up to SS tier. It really has that much going for it. Great single shot damage, massive magazine, consumes 1 ammo per shot, can regen its own ammo faster than it consumes it, and I think the rocket jumping utility is enough to get it to SS tier. It's arguably the best rocket launcher in the game, depending on what you value, although there are arguments for other rocket launchers as well. All right, and here is the updated tier list so far, just to give you guys a feel for what we're dealing with. All right, now next up is going to be the Bane. So this is a quest reward for completing the Bane. Now, the Bane screams while you're using it, which is nice. And if you try to turn down the in-game audio settings, the sound effects, nothing will actually turn the screaming down other than physically turning the volume down on your hardware. So that's a little annoying because audio cues are pretty important for the game, actually. So you either have to get rid of audio cues by turning the volume down or deal with the screaming. Although the bigger deal is the reduced movement speed while using the weapon. The Bane slows you down while using it, which is a big deal because on OP10 you need to be moving constantly, you need to be strafing even while shooting. You can swap off of it to run away, but you can't really strafe while using it, which is a big deal. It does come in every element, and it actually can't be non-elemental, interestingly. Now, the damage is actually very good. It's just the reduced movement speed and the screaming that hurt it. It's a hard one to rank because it does have good damage, but then it also has drawbacks. The community poll was close between B and C. I'm gonna go with C because of the downsides. We conducted multiple polls, and the second poll was closer to C. It might have even been between C and D, so I think C tier is fair. While the downsides can be mitigated by turning the volume down or weapon swapping, they are still a hindrance, especially on OP10, so... All right, up next is the Bearcat. Drops from Binary Boss at 12.5%, Tubbies at 1.67%. I'm not going to make the joke every time. Sorry, guys, I don't have it in me to do that. Loot Midgets, 0.337%. So the Bearcat shoots grenades that deal Pure Splash. So pretty much anything that deals Pure Splash, Krieg can be really good with. Remember, Axton boosts Grenade Splash, not Pure Splash. Now, the Bearcat also comes in every element. It's hard to rank. It's got pretty good damage, actually, but it burns through ammo super quickly. Occasionally, it can perform really well. But if you aren't using Krieg, it's just too ammo efficient and inconsistent in my opinion. You sort of need to sweet spot with it, and if you do, it does good damage. But it's also a weapon that you can kind of kill yourself with if you're not careful. I really recommend the attack prefix. I got much better performance with the attack prefix because depending on the prefix, the projectiles will behave a lot differently. And like I said, I just found the attack prefix to be the best way to use it. This is definitely a weapon with a learning curve, and if you're not using it properly, the damage will drop off a lot. I will say during the community polls, some people did think the weapon could arguably be B tier, and that's really not as crazy as it sounds. I do think overall it deserves C tier though. Next is the Bekah. So the Bekah does drop from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate. Now the Bekah has plus 50% crit damage. It does also fire a bullet that spawns 3 additional bullets, which will then sort of hover and then fly out and hit the enemy. So the Bekah is incredibly good and incredibly good looking. So very gorgeous weapon skin, great damage. I prefer the damage clamp to the wild clamp because the wild clamp has worse spread. It increases fire rate, which I don't really care about for this weapon. Now, you might want to avoid spamming shots if the recoil gets too severe. So this is a weapon you might want to sort of slow down with and pace your shots more. A lot of Jacob's weapons are like that. I actually found I could sometimes consistently use it with points and velocity on 0, and it was just devastating. Because normally with velocity on a weapon like this, it'll make the pellets harder to work with. But if you can maintain enough distance to keep, 5 or even 10 points in velocity, it makes this weapon just even more monstrous than it already is. So an easy S tier weapon. The only thing it lacks is raid potential. It's good everywhere else. And that's kind of a good example of the difference between an S tier and an SS tier weapon. The Bekah is good pretty much everywhere, on every character, mobbing, bossing. It's just not good for raiding. So no SS tier. Up next is the Bitch. So the Bunker drops this at a 3.3% rate, Master Gi drops it at a 1.7% rate, and it does World Drop. Now, the Bitch has plus 75% crit damage, which is nice. It does come in every element. The Bitch is just a strong, straightforward weapon. It achieves max accuracy super quickly, so it's like laser accurate, and with that crit damage, it's just again, a very good, straightforward weapon. Really accurate weapon, has the Hyperion reverse recoil, good damage, it's got that critical hit modifier plus 75%, comes in every element. Really not a lot to say about it, other than a very good, straightforward weapon, easily an A tier weapon. All right, up next is the Blockhead. So this is obtained from the Badass Creeper in the Minecraft Easter egg area in the Caustic Caverns at a 6.25% rate. So it's the Longbow. They both are obtained the same way. So the Blockhead does have plus 100% grenade splash. It's a really amazing weapon, especially on Axton, but it's just really good in general. It doesn't need crits to be good. It's got good range for a shotgun. It's an easy A tier weapon. It honestly could be S tier. We conducted multiple community polls. I think the first one was A tier. I think the second one was S tier. It's just, it can put out so much damage and it's so consistent. It's got the good range. It's got the splash damage. I honestly think I'm going to go ahead and give it a low S tier ranking. I think it really is that good. I highly recommend trying this out if you haven't used it. All right, up next is one of the most consistently underrated weapons in the game. That is the Bone Shredder. So this drops from Bonehead 2.0 and 3.0, which is the ones on Digistruct Peak, and also Arguk the Butcher at 33%. They have a 33% chance to drop it. So the Bone Shredder shoots 3 projectiles for the cost of 2. It's basically a high rate of fire, low damage per shot shotgun in SMG form. You really want to use it at close range, guys, but it does have amazing damage. It's actually a top 5 DPS SMG in the game, at least according to Admiral Baru's old top 5 best in slot series. Now, even if you think that series had flawed methodology, it was still a good, general idea for weapon performances. So the Bone Shredder undoubtedly hits super hard. The only downside is range. It does come in all elements, but it's an easy A tier weapon. This was in my top 10 underrated weapons because people do consistently underestimate it. But if you check out the performance, it is super good, especially on Zero and Maya. It just deletes enemies. So Bone Shredder, easy A tier. Up next is the frickin' Boom Puppy. So this is obtained from the Walking the Dog side quest in the campaign of Carnage. With the Boom Puppy, you do kind of need to be careful not to kill yourself. I believe you can use the Sham to help absorb the rounds, which could prevent you from killing yourself. If you get the rounds to bounce on enemies just right, it can deal massive damage. You can even kill big bosses like Saturn doing that. You can also use Axton's turrets to try to generate bounces for massive damage. You can use a singularity to pull enemies against the wall to try to get more bounces that way. It's just kind of an unwieldy weapon. It can be pretty good at its peak. Krieg can be good with it because of its Pure Splash. It does deal Pure Splash. Overall, I think considering Krieg's use of it, the Saturn killing thing, Axton's ability to manipulate the projectiles with his turret for massive damage, I think it earns C tier. Some people probably are going to argue it should be higher, but I just don't feel it's consistent enough to be B tier. So for me, I'm going to have to give the Boom Puppy a C tier ranking. I really don't like the weapon, but I do acknowledge it has some interesting uses. I just don't think overall it's good enough for B tier. All right, so up next we have the Buffalo. So this is a quest reward for completing the Demon Hunter side quest in Lynchwood. So the Buffalo has no sight. That means it cannot have a mag accessory, a fire rate accessory, or a damage accessory, So I'd recommend the critical hit accessory. So the Buffalo is honestly super fun. It's one of my favorite weapons to use, even though it's not fantastic. The damage is not great. The fire rate's not great. It's one of those weapons which has high damage, but then lower everything else. And most of those weapons, like the Buffalo, the damage is just not good enough for all the downsides. So while I do find it to be a very fun weapon, I've got a weapon review of it if you want to check that out. It can be surprisingly good, especially on Zero and Maya, but overall it's got to be C tier. It just does not perform well. Maya is pretty good at mobbing with it, again, with the subsequence build. But I think considering their proficiency with it, it's good enough to be C tier. So as much as it pains me, I do have to give the Buffalo C tier. Up next, we have the Bunny. So Tubby's dropped this at a 5% rate, except between levels 50 and 61, where it's a 25% rate. The Bunny, when you reload it, it bounces around on the ground exploding. It does benefit from grenade splash, like all TDO reloads. You have to be careful not to kill yourself. Like, to land the reload with this, you have to kind of like kamikaze yourself, I found. I don't really like it. I think the damage of it can be pretty good, and it can come in all elements. It's just an unwieldy weapon, easy to kill yourself. I'm not a big fan of it. As a straight shooting rocket launcher, it can be decent. And sometimes it occasionally bugs, and it'll just fly out straight when you reload it. I noticed that happening to me. Rokar said from his testing, the True Neutral Ranger and TDO or Allegiance Relic will get you the most reload damage, and it can be pretty good. But overall, I would say it's got to be C tier. All right, baby, up next is one of my favorite shotguns in the game, and that is the Butcher. So the binary boss drops it at 12.5% rate, Tubby's at 1.67% rate, Loot Midget's at a 0.365% rate. So every shot of the Butcher has a 16.7% chance to add 2 bullets to the mag instead of consuming 1. It's honestly good without the vertical grip. I do have a video on it. Now, you'll see once we get to the Overcompensator, even the Overcompensator is still good. The Butcher is incredible. So it is a weapon you really want the vertical grip with. I should have mentioned this before. I'm considering these weapons with perfect parts. So for the most part, you don't really, like, parts don't make a huge difference for the most part. There are some weapons where they do, obviously, and shotguns with a low number of projectiles are obviously the weapons the most commonly associated with the accessory making a huge difference. And that is because the vertical grip always just adds 2 projectiles. So you do really want the vertical grip with the Butcher because that'll take it from having 3 projectiles to having 5. That's obviously a huge bonus. So like I said, it is good without the vertical grip. With the vertical grip, it's literally one of the highest damage shotguns in the game. So I highly recommend trying to get it with the vertical grip. With the vertical grip, it's easily an S tier weapon. So it does come in all elements. It's just a hard weapon to get, but if you can get that vertical grip, it is easily an S tier shotgun, S tier weapon. All right, up next is another one of my favorite weapons in the game. That is the Chopper, baby. So this does drop from Deciduous at a 33% rate. So pulling the trigger once makes it fire endlessly unless you melee or swap weapons or something. So it fires 4 projectiles for 6 ammo. And this is honestly a very underrated weapon. Like, it deals incredible damage. It comes in every element. It just absolutely melts bosses, guys. It's good for mobbing if you learn to manage it, and it's not that hard. Really, all you have to do is melee to cancel the firing. So it's highly powerful. It's just a little unwieldy, but it's not so bad with the melee cancel. Like on Wilhelm, on Zero, I killed Wilhelm in like 4 seconds for around 250 ammo. So it's not as inefficient as you think, because assault rifles have a large ammo pool anyway. So it deserves A tier at the very least. I would honestly give it S tier if not for the ammo management and the fact that you need to melee cancel. On my Zero video of it, I ran all the way through Washburn Refinery without having to buy ammo again. Although I did use a stockpile relic at first, but it's not as ammo inefficient as people think. So the Chopper honestly deserves at least A tier. I'm going to give it A tier. Very few weapons can melt bosses as fast as the Chopper. So just because it's ammo inefficient doesn't mean it deserves to be like C tier, because it's really not that ammo inefficient considering how strong it is, you know. So definitely an A tier weapon. All right, baby. Up next, we got the Carnage. So the only way to get this is from Tubbies, who drop it at a 1.67% rate. So the Carnage fires rockets that deal pure splash. So get your Kriegs ready for this guy. You can absorb the projectiles as well, I believe, with like a sham. You do really want the vertical grip. Again, this is another weapon where it's only got 1 projectile normally. So with the vertical grip, it has 3 projectiles. It's another very good pearlescent. Pearls in this game really are not as bad as people think. Some of them are, but honestly, there's a lot of really good pearls. So you do really want the vertical grip on it, though. Now, strangely, it's the only vertical grip weapon that actually consumes more ammo. So with the vertical grip, it will actually consume 3 ammo per shot, which is so strange. So it does burn through ammo. Now, like I said, Krieg is super good with this weapon, but it's a pretty underrated pearl. It can deal crits, but it matches the damage of other good weapons without needing to crit, you know? So I think the Carnage does deserve A tier for sure. And here is the updated tier list now for the first 20 weapons. Remember, Buffalo is C tier. This tier list didn't have the Buffalo for some reason. But up next is the Chulainn. So you get this from the Clan Wars Zaffers versus Hodunk's questline. It deals slag and shock damage, but it also slags the user. It does have plus 50% gun splash. Now, unfortunately, the self-slag persists for a little bit after swapping. It ranks lower than comparable weapons because of the self-slag, right? Now, one thing that does help boost its ranking is self-slag is actually good for the Maya Hatterax recompense skill. That's one niche it does have, and I am counting utility like that. But the damage is definitely not worth it. You might want to try a Malawon Allegiance Relic for extra damage, but, you know, then you would lose cooldown from the bone. It honestly deserves D tier, considering damage is below average and it self-slags, which, yes, it does matter. I'm sorry, Chulainn lovers. I let Smub talk me into making it C tier because of the ability to self-slag being useful for the Maya Hatterax recompense skill. So that's the only thing that saves it from being D tier. So I will give Chulainn C tier. All right, up next is the Chere-amie. You need to complete the Hyperion Slaughter in the Iridium Blot to get this weapon. The Chere-amie actually does have plus 20% crit damage, which is nice. It also has 2 healing methods. 15% of the Chere-amie's damage will heal you, and then 2% of all damage dealt while holding the weapon. So it's got 2 different healing methods, which is nice. I believe it also lacks splash damage, so it's not as good at slagging as some other, you know, Malawon sniper rifles. It does come in all elements. Now, it's the only Moxie sniper, so it's great for 0 for rating because you won't lose critical ascension. So you can slag, heal, and maintain critical ascension all in one weapon. Now, the damage is actually pretty good. 0 and Maya can both mob very effectively with it. It can be good at bossing, but it needs support like Wreck or Reaper or Critical Ascension. It honestly has high enough damage, healing, and utility to be near the top of B tier. It could arguably be A tier, depending on how much you value the Moxie Sniper, so utility for rating. It honestly could be B tier. I think for right now, I'm going to go top. I mean, it could be A tier. I think for right now, I'm going to go top of B tier. I may end up changing my mind about it. Now, A tier is starting to get bloated. But remember, guys, the point is not to equally fill every single tier with the same number of weapons. The point is to accurately rank the weapons. So if Borderlands 2 just has an abundance of really good weapons, it's only fair that the tier list reflects that, right? Like, I don't think I should arbitrarily chop off part of a tier list and bump it down just because a tier is getting bloated. That's my personal feeling anyway. All right, up next is going to be the Cobra. So this drops from Pete's Burners at a 0.045% chance in the beatdown. It took me forever to get this. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know the beatdown is one of the most commonly ran maps on my channel for mobbing sections. So I had done hundreds of beatdown runs, at least 100, maybe close to 200 before I finally got my Cobra drop, which I got in my Cobra review. So if you want to check out that video, I would recommend doing so. It took me forever to get it. But now that said, while the Cobra is super rare, spoiler alert, it's not very good, unfortunately. So it's a kinetic, it's a non-elemental sniper that does also deal explosive damage, right? It's got plus 80% gun splash. It's just way too low for the horrible fire rate. It's another one of those weapons where like the fire rate just kills it. There's a lot of snipers like this. There are a few snipers like this, like the bolt action ones, which have higher damage but low fire rate, but the high damage is just not good enough, which is really frustrating because a bolt action sniper with like an actual bad fire rate but super high single shot damage would have been awesome. We didn't really get that though, so that's very frustrating. 0 with Two Fang can actually make the Cobra really good. That's just such a hyper specific niche. I cannot make the weapon be higher ranked because of that. And that's what I'm saying. It's going to be C tier, guys. The Cobra is C tier. 0 himself can perform at an A tier level with it, but that's what I'm saying. A weapon can be C tier and still have higher tier potential, but just in more limited scenarios. So just because it's C tier doesn't mean it's always bad. It just means it's usually bad. Up next is the Commerce. So Assassin Watt drops this at a 33% rate. Now, this is also a shock-locked SMG. Something I did not realize about this weapon is that the bullets actually pierce enemies. So that's interesting. The Commerce can actually perform decently well on 0 and Maya, and it just kind of sucks on everyone else. Other than that, it's just a pretty boring weapon. There's not a lot to talk about. I would give it C tier. All right, up next is the Conference Call, baby. So the Warrior drops this at a 1.25% rate, although I think it's a lot higher in the story kill, around 15% if I'm not mistaken. The Handsome Sorcerer drops it at a 4.13% rate. Could be higher during the story kill, I'm not sure about that. Now, the Conference Call does come in every element. It also world drops. So again, Hatterax is amazing for getting them. If you guys have been watching my streams, I've got a lot of these farming Hatterax. I really need to get back to streaming. I'm sorry guys, I've had a lot going on. I'm gonna try to get back to it soon though. The Conference Call is an amazing weapon. I think everyone knows that. I don't agree with the take that it's bad for mobbing, but I do agree that like for smaller enemies it's bad. For mobbing it still can be good, like for loaders and bigger mobs. For smaller mobs it will drop off, but for badasses it's super good. It's really great for bosses. The Conference Call is an amazing raid bosser. It does have unlisted projectiles for B abuse. Some people think it got nerfed. The Conference Call didn't get nerfed, guys. What happened in the early days of the game was when it came to amp shields, every single weapon got full amp damage on every single pellet, whether the pellets were listed or not. What Gearbox did was they made it so that only unlisted pellets get full amp. So the Conference Call has a ton of unlisted pellets, so it still gets to abuse the B shield. It's not as good with the B shield as it used to be, but it's still really good with it. You can also do like crazy chain reaction chains with it. The conference call is easily an SS tier weapon. If anything is SS tier, it's conference call. Amazing for raid bossing, amazing for bossing, really good for mobbing. Except again, you know, the only time you wouldn't want to mob with it is against really smaller enemies. But in general, it's a great weapon that you can just never go wrong with. Easily SS tier. I've got a world record speed kill against Son of Cromrax with 0 in 2 minutes and 8 seconds. Like, it's crazy good. All right, up next is the Creamer. So to get the Creamer, you do have to complete the final round of the creature slaughter, round number 5. Now, the Creamer does heal you for 2% of all damage dealt. It is a Moxie rocket launcher, which is really nice. I recently did a weapon review of it if you want to check that out. It's actually a top 5 DPS rocket launcher if you sweet spot with it. When you do shoot it, it fires a projectile that explodes and then creates 2 more projectiles that deal 80% base damage of the main projectile. If you can sweet spot with it, you can shoot it and get all 3 projectiles to explode all together, and it'll deal massive damage, and it has healing. And it only consumes 1 ammo per shot. For all of that together, amazing damage, good healing. On OP10, it's going to be really good healing. Only consumes 1 ammo per shot. It's easily an A tier weapon, if not an S tier weapon. I actually think I'm going to bump it up to S tier because having damage that good and also healing, I think makes it S tier. The only argument against that is you do have to sweet spot with it, but it's honestly not that hard to sweet spot with. So I'm honestly going to give it S tier. It is good for mobbing. It is good for bossing. For raid bossing, it would be limited, but it would still be good to get like second wins with it, because the thing about getting a second win with a Moxie weapon is when you get back up out of fight for your life, you will have your health back up. I think looking at other A tier weapons, like it has equal damage to them, but then also healing. So for me, that's enough to push it up to S tier, even though you have to sweet spot with it. In my opinion, it's not really fair to punish weapons because of a skill issue. So if you can't sweet spot with it, is it really fair to blame the weapon for it? I know that's going to be kind of controversial, but just in my opinion, I wouldn't feel right punishing the weapon because like I personally messed up with, unless it was super hard to do or super unwieldy. But the Creamer is pretty reasonable to sweet spot with, so in my opinion it's just enough to be S tier. All right, up next we have the Crit. The Crit is a quest reward for completing Critical Fell and Dragon Key. Now the Crit has a plus 150% critical hit modifier, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, it does have a 12% chance to drop on reload, so every time you reload it, there's a 12% chance it'll just fall out of your hands. Now you can drop reload to bypass that, although I don't really consider that an exploit. Now the Crit also has 2.5% healing, and it is shock locked. The Crit is honestly really good on Zero and Maya. It's definitely capable of A tier damage, but being shock locked holds it back, as well does the drop chance. And it's not as strong on other characters, although it's still pretty good. Now, the thing is, guys, when it comes to a weapon being shock locked, you have to remember most of the time you would want a corrosive weapon for loaders or a fire weapon for bandits. The thing about shock is it's less good because yes, it's more consistent, but it's less overall damage. So for example, if the Crit could be fire, it would basically gain a 1.75 times multiplier against flesh enemies. That would be enough to definitely make it A tier for me. It's not that the damage is bad, it's just that the damage is not good enough considering the drop chance for me to rank it A tier. So personally, I'm going to rank the Crit B tier. All right, up next we have the Dahlminator. So this is obtained from completing the Lost Treasure in Sawtooth Cauldron. So the Dahlminator is corrosive locked and it deals pure splash. It's not a very good weapon. It's pretty slow at killing things. One thing to keep in mind, something I noticed doing these weapon reviews, guys, is that when it comes to loaders, the double accessory for pistols is actually super, super good. If you're fighting loaders, I think the double accessory is the meta accessory. I've noticed, like the Dahlminator, I tried it first with no double accessory and it was D tier. I tried it later with the double accessory and it was at least C tier. I'm going to give the Dahlminator C tier, but that is something I learned doing this, is the double accessory is super, super good for loaders because you can reliably hit both shots on the crit spot. Now, the Dahlminator I don't think can land crits, but I'm just saying. So for pretty much any pistol, a corrosive locked pistol, I highly recommend double accessory. For using pistols against loaders in general, I would recommend double accessory. It really does make a huge difference. For that reason, I'm going to give it C tier. That said, that makes me think I would like to make a video covering perfect parted gear because there's a lot of nuances. Guys, in general, for perfect parts, I would just recommend damage accessory and matching grip. Now, there's a lot of nuances beyond that, so eventually I may just make a video to cover my thoughts on that. You can also check Loot Lemon. Loot Lemon shows max DPS rolls for paper math. So like they will favor fire rate bonuses and stuff like that a lot. But in general, you can check that. If not, I would recommend going for matching grip and damage accessory. Down the road, I do want to make a video covering perfect parts. But yeah, Dahlminator C tier. All right, up next is the Damned Cowboy. Oh my god, this thing is so freaking bad. You do get this from Bloodtail and Candlerack's Crag, who drops it at a 33% rate. So the Damned Cowboy somehow has plus 35% critical hit damage, but you would never know it by using it. It's so fucking bad. It apparently has increased bullet speed. It's also just so fucking bad. It's literally one of the worst weapons I've ever touched. It's also just so fucking bad. It's the absolute bottom of D tier so far. as, you know, even other D tiers can often perform well. This one is just so fucking bad. Bottom of D tier. All right, up next is an interesting weapon, and that is going to be the Deliverance, guys. This is a shotgun obtained from Toomba in the Wildlife Reserve. He drops it at a 10% rate. The Gold Golem actually also drops it at a 1.95% rate, interestingly. It does come in all elements, and when you reload the Deliverance, it will float through the air and shoot at the enemy. I found that it was best to stand far away when you throw it, and then that'll give it time to sort of float towards an enemy and keep shooting. And it'll actually deal pretty good damage if you do that. There's an effect where if you have like a Badaboom, there's a glitch you can do, or any weapon that matches the projectiles, the same amount of projectiles as Deliverance. What you can do is there's an effect where if your held weapon matches the card's projectiles and element, the thrown Deliverance inherits the held weapon's damage. So like the Badaboom is excellent for this. I believe the reload benefits every pellet from the B shield. As a regular shotgun, it's decent, but kind of underwhelming. Zero can one-shot out of Deception with it, but he can do that with pretty much every shotgun. Another thing is, if you're using this in Deception, it'll benefit from Ambush, which is pretty cool. So ultimately, it's a very gimmicky shotgun. It does have that glitch. The reload is pretty good. Again, you have to kind of know how to use it. I think the community tier list was C tier. I'm actually going to give it B tier because it can perform pretty well as a regular shotgun. I mean, it's underwhelming, but it's decent. But considering the glitch and also considering, you know, if you do use it properly, if you stand far away and reload with it, it can actually deal pretty good damage. You know, again, it will benefit from the B shield if you want to abuse it like that. If you reload it, I think overall it does deserve B tier. All right, next up is the Devastator. So I really do not like this pistol, guys. It drops from Master Gi at a 33.3% rate. It also drops from Hyperius at a 0.29% rate. So the Devastator always fires twice, and it shoots slow-moving bullets. It's also got horrible fucking accuracy, and it does have plus 100% grenade splash. It can be decent on the right character, but it's very inconsistent. Just the bad accuracy and the slow-moving projectiles make it hard to work with. But when you can consistently crit, the damage is actually good. It's just super hard to do that. So Maya can do a bit of work with it with Phase Lock, with Wreck and Reaper. You can hold the enemy still. I'm just not a huge fan of how unwieldy it is, but it probably does deserve B tier. I think the community poll was C tier, which is fair. Like, I do think the damage potential is high enough to be B tier. It's just a question of the weapon is so unwieldy. It's hard to consistently do that with. This is also not really, I mean, it's sort of a skill issue thing, but it's also just a weapon where, like, if you're using it on specific types of enemies, it'll be easier, like loaders, if you're playing Maya, to hold the enemies still. So it's a weapon I'm very torn on. I think ultimately I'm going to give it B tier for now, because it does have B tier damage potential. I think realistically, it's often going to perform as a C tier weapon though. All right, up next we have the Dog. So this drops from Assassin Roof at a 33% rate. This is a reference to Free Dog in Fallout 3. Not one of my favorite Fallout games, but I honestly do enjoy it, at least as a part of Tale of Two Wastelands. So the Dog does come in all elements. It's just a very good shotgun. There's not much to say about it other than it's really good. It's an easy A tier shotgun. Most bandit shotguns are good. This is no exception. Easy A tier. All right, up next is the Elephant Gun. So this drops from Arizona in Hammerlock's Hunt at a 33% rate. So like the Buffalo, it cannot have a sight, so the critical hit accessory is best. High damage, low everything else, but the damage is not high enough to make up for the downsides, just like a lot of weapons like that. You can bypass the low fire rate by swapping off and back onto it. Zero can use the Rough Rider to help boost the fire rate. It's not very good, guys. It can one-shot OP10 enemies, but just the fire rate is so bad. It is satisfying to use. It's a very fun weapon to use. I want to be clear. I'm not just saying it's not fun. I'm just saying, even though it is fun, I'm not going to be biased and rank it higher for that. It is fun to me with Zero and Maya, but it's not very good. Critical Ascension can kind of help make it C tier, considering it's one of the few snipers that can get Critical Ascension on both Two-Fang shots. So the vast majority of snipers in this game, if you're using Critical Ascension with Two-Fang, the Two-Fang proc cannot gain a stack of Critical Ascension. However, the Elephant Gun is one of the few snipers with a low enough fire rate that both shots can get Critical Ascension. So the base shot and the Two-Fang proc. You can check out my Elephant Gun review if you want to see that. But overall, it's definitely a C tier weapon. Best part of the Facecam video, I gotta show off this guy. So like, subscribe, comment if you think Shadow's a very good, handsome boy. Maybe become a member. I'm sure Shadow would really appreciate it. He's only got a nub. It wiggles when he's excited. All right, here's the currently updated tier list. Just pretend the Buffalo is next to the Elephant Gun, because like I said, for some reason it was not on the tier list. All right, but up next is the Emperor. Now, the Emperor has a 5% chance to drop from every assassin in Southpaw, except on Digistruct Peak, which for some reason, I think it's like 2.5% or something. Weird. So the Emperor is a very overly hated weapon. I should have talked about this with the Bone Shredder. The Bone Shredder, well, I mean, I did mention it's one of the most consistently underrated weapons in the game. The tier list, community tier list, kept voting it as B tier. In my opinion, it's at least A tier. The Emperor does deserve B tier, but the Emperor is so overly hated because, like, It's actually a fine weapon. It's totally competent, totally fine. I've got a weapon review of it if you want to check it out. It's just boring. It just fires piercing bullets. That's pretty much the only interesting thing about it. So it's not an exciting weapon, but it's nowhere near as bad as people make it out to be. It's a pretty strong weapon. Like on Zero and Maya, it's really good. In general, it's just a solid B tier weapon. Nowhere near as bad as people make it out to be. Totally capable of quickly killing OP 10 enemies. And like I said, it's actually pretty strong on Zero and Maya. So Emperor, definitely B tier. All right, up next we have the Evil Smasher. So you get this one from the Chosen One side quest in Sawtooth Cauldron. It does have plus 90% grenade splash. Now, reloading the Evil Smasher has a 7% chance to massively buff the next magazine with 9 effects, including plus 900% damage and plus 6% fire rate. So with that effect, it is really good. Unfortunately, if you swap off, it loses the effect. It really sucks without it. Without the effect, it's definitely D tier. It's so bad without the effect. The only question is the 7% chance on reload to buff the magazine enough to save it from D tier? I honestly don't think it is, guys. D tier doesn't mean it's useless. It just means most of the time it's really bad. Only having a 7% chance to activate that buff is just not enough to save it from D tier. So 7% is, what is that, like 1 in 16 or 1 in 17 or something? So 1 in 16 magazines will be good, but most of the time it's just going to suck, and you can't even swap to another weapon to keep the effect. It's so bad. So it's got to be D tier. Evil Smasher has to be D tier. Like I said, D tier doesn't mean never good. It means 99% of the time it's bad, and it is bad most of the time. I think 7% is like 1 in 14, but still, in my opinion, that's just not enough to save it from D tier. All right, up next we have the Fibber. So this is a quest reward for completing a real boy human. Now the Fibber does come in all elements, and the item card is lying. The real stats are different. The Fibber has 3 different barrels that significantly change the weapon / what it does. And this technically means the Fibber is 3 different weapons since the barrel defines the weapon. So I guess I should be saying the Fibbers are 3 different weapons. So there's the shotgun Fibber, which makes it like a shotgun. There's the 9 pills Fibber, which has the ricochet bullets. There's the crit Fibber, which has plus 700% crit damage. It shoots slow bullets that arc and ricochet off multiple surfaces. All 3 versions are really good. The ricochet version obviously has a learning curve, but I'll eventually make a more in-depth weapon review of it. It's a weapon that really deserves its own weapon review. So it does have unlisted projectiles for B abuse. And some weapons with a natural ricochet bypass the damage reduction from close enough. This is what Stereo Lotus told me about it. He said, if they ricochet by creating an unlisted projectile, then yes. If not, then close enough damage reduction can reduce it per bounce. So meaning you could get 50% damage reduction multiple times on some weapons before they hit a target. The Fibber is at least S tier. It's arguably SS tier. I'm kind of rating it overall and based off of its peak. I think it honestly probably does deserve SS tier. I think for now, I'm going to go high S tier, and at the end, I may come back and bump it up. I'm going to consult with people again before I give my final opinion on this. For now, it's at least S tier. Like I said, I may end up bumping it up down the road. All right, up next is the Flakker. So the Warrior has a 1.25% chance to drop it, and the Handsome Sorcerer has a 4.13% chance to drop it, although those can be higher on the story kills, I believe. Now the Torque Vendor also sells it in the campaign of Carnage. It's got a 16.7% chance to be there. It also world drops. Now the Flakker fires 3 or 5 invisible projectiles if you have the vertical grip. Each cause a chain of 6 explosions. Now the Flakker does have plus 110% gun splash. It's a bit awkward to use. It's hard to dial in the range, but it does great damage. Definitely deserves its own weapon review at some point for sure. So it does also have unlisted projectiles for B abuse. It's really good for large targets or groups of enemies as well. Plus you can use like a singularity to bunch them up. You can do stuff like Flakker habbing. You could swap on and off of it, but it can be unwieldy. It won't be good in all situations. I do think it's good enough for A tier considering it does have really good damage potential. Again, you really want the vertical grip. It can be really good in crowd control situations. Oftentimes you may not be able to get A tier performance out of it, but I do think A tier is fair, and the community poll was split between A and B. But they did ultimately vote A, and I do agree with that. I do think the Flakker deserves A tier. And just to elaborate on Flakker habbing real fast, that is where like you shoot the Flakker and then you swap to an Ahab, and then the damage of the Ahab will apply to all of the pellets of the Flakker blast. All right, up next is another controversial one, and that is going to be the Florentine. So this is obtained from the Flamerock Refuge Seraph shop. It does deal slag and shock damage. The splash damage is only slag. It's plus 50%. It has plus 50% grenade splash. It's a decent slag tool. It's pretty good at stripping shields. It's one of the better slag tools, I would say. A Maliwan Allegiance Relic can give it better DPS, but at the cost of losing cooldown from like a shock bone of the ancients. The damage alone is decent, but not amazing. I definitely wouldn't recommend using it as a regular weapon. Its niche is basically being a slag tool that is good at stripping shields. Now, if you compare that to like the Slag Pimpernel, obviously the Slag Pimpernel is going to be better. If you compare it to the Slagga is definitely overall the better slag tool, but I do think the Florentine can strip a shield faster. You know, considering the slag and shield stripping utility with mad damage, I do think it deserves B tier. Like I said, it's one of the better slag tools, but definitely not as good as the Slagga or the Slag Pimpernel, but still decent. So like I said, with the damage, I think B tier is fair. Up next is the Freminton's Edge. So this drops from Wreath and Digistruct Wreath at a 33% rate. Now, the Freminton's Edge does actually have plus 75% critical hit damage when you zoom in, which is really nice. It also has the second highest zoom of all weapons at 11.4, which makes it kind of unwieldy. Snipers are like snipers in general are really good. I talked about this in my snipers tier list. They have good damage and good range, and range is one of the best ways to survive on OP10. So I am giving snipers bonus points for that better range, but the zoom being that high does make it kind of hard to use at close and medium range, but it is still pretty good. Like I said, it comes in all elements. It's actually fairly underrated. I do almost feel like you could argue A tier for it, considering it is pretty unwieldy. It's hard to use close up. I think overall I'm going to give it a B tier ranking, but I honestly think you could argue A tier. All right, up next is the Godfinger. So this drops from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate. So the Godfinger spawns extra bullets the longer it travels, based on time, not distance. That is important because it means skills that would be great for it, like velocity and accelerate, are actually bad because fewer projectiles will spawn. This is because those skills that increase projectile speed, because the way these weapons work, like the Godfinger doesn't actually spawn its extra projectiles based on the distance, it spawns them based on how long it's traveling. So increasing the projectile speed means it will actually spawn fewer pellets because it'll be traveling for a shorter amount of time. That's really frustrating. Now that said, it does have unlisted projectiles, which is good for B abuse, and the Godfinger can technically hit for massive damage, but in most circumstances it sucks because you can't hit at that range. When enemies are super far away like that, it seems like they're coded to try to break line of sight, so they'll just go stand in a corner or something. Now Maya can hold enemies still to snipe from further away more easily, but still, I mean, I think technically the Godfinger has the highest single shot damage of all snipers if you have all of the projectiles. 99% of the time, you're just not going to be able to do that. That is textbook D tier material. D tier doesn't mean it can never be good. It means it's almost always bad. So just because the Godfinger is good in 1% of circumstances does not save it from D tier, because 99% of the time it is D tier. So that's where it's going to stay. All right, up next is the Good Touch. So you are likely to get the Good Touch after tipping for a Bad Touch. The Good Touch has plus 2.5% lifesteal and plus 70% critical hit damage. It is fire locked, of course. It's pretty much just a fire bad touch, but the Good Touch does constantly vibrate, which is nice if you're down bad. Not me though, I'm a 0 main. So it's not fantastic, but you know, again, with the healing, it's good enough to be B tier. That's pretty much all there is to say about it. All right, up next is the Greed. So this is a guaranteed drop from Roscoe. Now that mission is actually completable once. That is the one at the end of the Captain Scarlet DLC. You can repeat it once. It is a fire locked Jacob's pistol. So that's nice, an elemental Jacobs. Now it cannot spawn with the scope, so ADSing won't reduce movement speed, which is nice. Normally aiming does. With a weapon that cannot have a scope like this, it's considered a null scope, so you won't actually lose movement speed when you ADS. It is a bit unwieldy because of that. I mean, it has no sight, hard to use at first. I mean, I'm sure with practice, you know, it could be better, but in general, it's kind of hard to use. It does have very low recoil though, which is nice, and the damage is good. Unfortunately, I think the Maggie does beat it as long as the Maggie lands every projectile, and that's even on flesh targets. If the Maggie misses a single projectile, then the greed wins. In general, I would definitely like the Maggie better. The problem with the greed is, again, it's just unwieldy. Zero's deception can make it easier to line up shots as well. I do have a weapon review of this if you want to check that out. It's honestly very good. Like, the damage is probably A tier if you could land every single shot every single time, but realistically, you're just not going to be able to do that even with practice. So ultimately, I think B tier is fair. I don't think it would be crazy to put it in A tier, so I may end up changing my mind about that, but overall, realistically, I think it's going to be B tier. I really wish it could have, you know, a side, or honestly, I think the base damage should be higher. I mean, it should be able to out damage the Maggie, at least on flesh targets, you know, so it's a little bit disappointing in my opinion, although it's a fun weapon and definitely a good weapon. Overall, right now, I'm going to go high B tier. All right, up next is the dumbass Grog Nozzle. So at one point, the Grog Nozzle was farmable from the Gold Golem, but now you have to leave the Beard Makes the Man mission active, which is in Dragon Key. So I'm a Grog hater, everyone knows it. Everyone says you have to use this weapon, you don't. Now, some people, when I say that, they say, well, you don't have to use it, but it's meta, so you should. I don't know why Borderlands players think that just because something is meta, you have to use it. Every game is going to have a meta, guys. It doesn't mean you always have to use the meta shit, you know? Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate is my second favorite game ever. There are 14 weapons in that game and like 6 fighting styles for each weapon. Far and away, the strongest one is Valor Heavy Bowgun. It gets by far the best damage. It can kill things so quickly. I've never seen a single Monster Hunter player argue that the game is balanced around Valor Heavy Bowgun or that you have to use Valor Heavy Bowgun. It's meta, but all the other weapons are good too. So you do not have to use the Grog Nozzle. And in fact, there's a lot of weapons the Grog Nozzle is going to be bad for. So the Grog Nozzle, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Grog Nozzle is a slag-locked pistol. It shoots these slag projectiles, and it has 65% healing. So it's far and away the strongest healing tool. Now, it has the drunk effect. What this does, it's bad for most weapons. Like, for some weapons it's good, but for most weapons it's bad. It lowers fire rate by 50% and adds 5 projectiles. It has increased spread and sway. And the drunk effect can allow for some cool stuff. I'm not denying that. You can do some cool drunk shotting shenanigans with the Hive and the Norfleet. The drunk effect will allow you to skip Digistruct Peak with like a Badaboom, but in general, it's not good. Now, if you abuse meta stuff all the time, like the Pimpernel and the Herald and the Topnia and the Grog and the Norfleet, the drunk effect is good for all of those. But for most shotguns, most snipers, like most regular weapons, you don't want to lower the fire rate, get horrible spread, and add 5 projectiles. For some weapons, it's really good. For most weapons, it's really bad. Here's the thing about this. The Grog Nozzle is a great utility tool. Good slag, great, the best, far and away, the best healing in the game, 65%. I think the Ruby is second best at like 12%. Now, people always criticize Gearbox for this thing, but here's the thing, guys. I don't think this community ever stopped to ask themselves, why is the Grog Nozzle so much better? Why did Gearbox make you leave a quest open just to keep this stupid thing? The thing is, they never intended for you guys to do that, but gamers love optimizing the fun out of stuff. So once gamers discovered this side quest, they found this weapon and they thought, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to keep this the whole game. Guys, did you ever stop to ask yourself, why does the Grog have such high healing? The answer is because during the mission, the Beard Makes the Man, you're supposed to get these dwarves drunk and crush them in this mining thing. Now, Gearbox realized that it would be really annoying if you kept dying while trying to do that. So they just gave the Grog Nozzle a shit ton of healing to make it a little bit easier. Now, Gearbox did not think ahead and realize that because this existed, players would want to leave the mission open just to keep the item forever. Now, I think as a little bonus, if you were playing the game in the early days, they said, okay, we'll let you farm this, but they never changed their mind. They never made it permanently obtainable. I don't think they ever wanted players to permanently keep it. And that's fine. You don't need the Grog Nozzle for anything in the game. Sure, it's the best healing tool if you want to take it, but there's a lot of builds where the drunk effect is going to be bad. The only real thing that I ever use it for is doing Digistruct Peak Skip, which is cool. I use it for Hyperius and Veracitus too, because of their Novas, which are really dumb. But that's not because the game is balanced around the Grog Nozzle. That's just because Hyperius and Veracitus are really dumb. And you could probably still get away with a Ruby in those fights too, but for most of the game, if you want a Moxie weapon, the Ruby is just fine. Even Melee Zero doesn't need a Grog Nozzle. If you want to check out my Melee Zero guide, even the Ruby is perfectly fine. So I'm a Grog hater. I think the community never stopped to question why it was so strong. There's plenty of things to criticize Gearbox for, but locking the Grog Nozzle into a side quest is not one of them. Like, if you want to abuse this tool, it's perfectly acceptable to make you leave that quest open. So it's obviously SS tier. I'll just go ahead and say it. It allows you to do a lot of shit. Like I said, Peak Skip. Like I said, Drunk Effect is good for a lot of weapons, even though for most weapons it's bad. But for some weapons, it's really good. It allows for some really crazy stuff. It allows for some boss melts. It does have the best healing in the game at 65%. It's a good slag tool. It's not a great slag tool, honestly, because you do not want to be standing there in the open with a slow slagging pistol with a small magazine trying to slag enemies. That's why players think you have to just stand there out in the open and just keep using a Moxie weapon to get your health back up. I would highly recommend switching to a Slagga or a Slag Pimpernel as your primary slag tool, because they're so much more efficient for slagging groups of enemies. You don't just have to stand there out in the open waiting for it to happen. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there. It does deserve at least S tier because it can do a lot of stupid shit. I'm just a hater. I'm not going to give it SS tier. I'm going to give it S tier. The weapon doesn't do anything on its own. It's a pure utility tool. If you don't, like, you can't really, it's not really a good weapon on its own, but considering the utility, considering all the stupid shit it can do, considering the drunk effect, the 65% healing, I will go ahead and give it S tier, even though I hate it. All right, I got off on a tangent there. Let's get back on track. Now, again, if you enjoy using it, use it. Again, guys, I'm talking about in the context of the pervasive narrative around this game, that the game is balanced around it, when that's obviously not true. You play however the hell you want, man. Enjoy your game. I'm just saying that's my thoughts on the Grog Nozzle. All right, up next is the Gub. So this drops from Laning White in the fridge at a 10% rate. Now the Gub is corrosive locked and it shoots slow moving rounds. It's a pretty underrated pistol. It's pretty good for mobbing, but not amazing. The damage can actually be pretty good. And it's got, like, the thing is, when you have damage, when you have a magazine this big, you can just keep shooting over and over and over and over, and that can actually help a lot. But this weapon does get hated on a lot. Now, some people have probably already commented that Joltz doesn't hate it. It's just a meme in his community because it shows up so much. I get it, guys. I am not saying Joltz hates it. I'm just saying in general, the community shits on it. So for example, Mick covered it on OP0. And the gist of what people thought was that the Gub is good on OP0, but OP10 is just so poorly balanced, you can't use the Gub on OP10. That is not true. The Gub is plenty strong on OP10. I have a video if you want to see that, or you could just watch the footage on screen. Some people really struggle with watching the footage on screen before they comment. Yeah, it's a perfectly viable weapon even on OP10, even with no badass rank, even with no B shield, even with no Grog Nozzle. It's just kind of underwhelming, but it definitely deserves at least B tier. So up next we have the Gunerang. Now this does drop from Rackman at a 10% rate and also Master Gi at a 1.7% rate, and it also world drops. So the Gunerang does come in all elements, and when you throw it, it goes in a straight line, it bounces off stuff for 1.5 seconds, then reverses direction and homes in on enemies. The chuck damage is actually really good, but it's hard to consistently use, at least for me. As a straight shooting pistol, it's actually not bad either. It's so hard to rank. Like, damage-wise, it deserves at least A tier. When you can get it to consistently blow up on enemies, it's absolutely at least A tier. But apparently, like, when there's a lot of enemies, people have told me it can get confused and, like, struggle to lock onto the right enemy. I think for now, I'm gonna go B tier, but I may change my mind at the end. The thing is, with this one, like earlier I said I wasn't going to punish a weapon if it's like a skill issue that makes you not be able to use it well. The Gunerang is on the line of where it's kind of the weapon being that unwieldy versus it, you know, just like if you have something like the Creamer, where like you can consistently practice with it to get to the point where you can usually sweet spot with it. The Gunerang is on the line of where it verges into territory of where I think it arguably does lose a tier because of it being unwieldy. For now, I'm going to go B tier. I may end up changing my mind at the end though. It definitely has A tier potential. All right, Gwen's head. So it always spawns in one of 5 boxes in the dust, and it does come in all elements. It's got plus 75% critical hit damage, and it always has TD or grip. It's actually a pretty good weapon. I think a lot of people do like this weapon. Now, it is actually a reference to the movie 7. Well, there's really no way to not spoil it, but a character in the movie goes, "What's in the box?" So that's why they're saying Handsome Jack says that when you open the box. Apparently, Claptrap will say the line if you've already completed the game because Handsome Jack is dead. Spoiler alert. Yeah, I think the Gwen's head definitely deserves B tier. I don't know if it's good enough for A tier. I do think it's a solid B tier weapon. All right, baby. Up next is the Hell. So the Hell is an amazing weapon. This is the reward for completing the final round of the Bandit Slaughter in Fink's Slaughterhouse. So the Hell has so much to talk about. It's got plus 200% critical damage. It shoots arcing bullets that split into 2. So it's got Unlisted Projectiles, good for B abuse. It's got plus 80% grenade splash. And it's got plus 3% lifesteal. It comes in all elements except non-elemental, which is nice, so it's easy to farm. It's a ridiculously strong weapon. It's so good. Increasing bullet speed in most cases will be undesirable, as it will make it harder to sweet spot with. It's hard to sweet spot with this. I mean, the thing is, you don't really need to sweet spot with this weapon to deal great damage with it. So that may not necessarily be true. I found it super hard to sweet spot with though, because even with no speed bonuses, it splits pretty far away. it's really hard to sweet spot with, in my opinion. Maybe less so for raid bosses, but like for mobbing, you just need too much distance to sweet spot. But the thing is, you don't need to. Like, you can use it at point blank range and it'll melt mobs. So you avoid the swift prefix and the rapid prefix. Ferocious is my favorite, which is damage. I would also avoid velocity and accelerate if you wish to sweet spot. Because again, it splits much further away than the lead storm, making it harder to sweet spot with, like I said. Personally, I like the lead storm a little bit better, but the hell is very good. It's arguably better considering it has healing and grenade splash, but I do personally like the lead storm better. Like with the hell, it's much harder to kill Hatterax because of the arc, although it's probably still possible. On Accent in particular, the hell is probably better, but overall, I do like the lead storm a bit more. They're very similar weapons. Now, if you can sweet spot with the hell, it'll absolutely be better. So let me know if you can. Let me know if there's an easy way to sweet spot with it that I'm just not seeing. I also think like if your field of view is too small, it'll be harder to use the weapon. It's not really a weapon that I like to ADS with. I just kind of go point blank hip firing with it. But you know, if you are good at sweet spotting with it and you have any tips, feel free to share them. But the damage, the healing, I mean, it's got raid bossing potential too. It's got amazing damage, amazing healing, raiding potential. It honestly deserves low SS tier. It honestly is that high. Because the thing is, guys, if you just put it in S tier, like it matches the damage of other S tier weapons, but it also has healing, and then it also has raiding potential. So that's the main difference between an S tier weapon and an SS tier weapon, is the raiding potential and the utility. Because it's got S tier damage, healing, and raid potential. That's classic SS tier. All right. So up next, we have the Hammer Buster. So this drops from McNally and the Dust at a 10% rate. It's not a very interesting weapon. It's honestly very underwhelming. There's just not much to say about it. It's either low B tier or high C tier. I honestly think looking at other B tier weapons, it's just not as good. So I honestly think high C tier is fair. It's just not, it's not great anywhere. It's meh for mobbing. You could probably argue B tier, so it's one I may change my mind on, but for now I'm gonna say C tier. All right, up next we have the Hawkeye. So Veracitus and Triple O both drop this at a 50% rate. So for Triple O, well, let me explain Triple O. There's a bug where if you're playing on Ultimate Vault Hunter mode and you fast travel to Candlerack's Crag before you spawn Triple O, he'll be guaranteed to drop either a Hawkeye or an Interfacer along with his 33% Twister chance. It's a bug, I don't really understand it, but he will, that will happen. Now, if you don't do that, Triple O will still have a 1.5% chance to drop it. Dex C has a 1.5% chance to drop it as well. So the Hawkeye has plus 420% critical hit damage. It also has the highest zoom in the game at 11.6, so it can be hard to use close up. Now, the Hawkeye gets unfairly hated on in my opinion, because if you ask most people, they will say they like the Muckamuck. And in most cases, the Hawkeye is an upgraded Muckamuck. Now, I say most cases because like on Zero, because of the crit bonuses, like where the Hawkeye has lower base damage but better crit bonuses, the Hawkeye is actually worse on Zero than a Muckamuck because, you know, he already has a lot of crit damage. He would rather have the high base damage of the Muckamuck. But still, in general, the Hawkeye is usually an upgraded Muckamuck. So based off that, I think people tend to not think of it in that light just because, you know, like I said, sometimes it is worse than a Muckamuck. They kind of underrate it. Also, being locked behind Veracitus, it is definitely not good. It's definitely not as good as it should be. Let me be clear about that. There are a lot of weapons in this game which are really good, but just not as good as they should be, which is, you know, a fair criticism of the Hawkeye. It's a decent bosser on Zero and Maya. It's a great mobber, good damage and safety with that range. Again, guys, fighting from further away is huge. Like it's the easiest way to survive on OP10 is to maintain your range. And snipers like the Hawkeye allow you to do that. So even though people wouldn't think so, the Hawkeye absolutely deserves A tier. There's no way around it. It's an upgraded Muckamuck most of the time. The Muckamuck is definitely an A tier weapon in my opinion. So I really like the Hawkeye. I think it deserves A tier. And here is the now updated tier list. I decided to move a bit of them around after all. You can see I put some of them in B tier. The Gunerang just barely making it to A tier. The community polls were split. Some went A, some went B. I'm ultimately going to give the Gunerang A tier because it is good as a straight shooting gun and it does have the damage potential. It's just kind of unwieldy. You could definitely argue B tier for it though. But all right, next up is the Heartbreaker. So you do get this from the Safe and Sound quest, which you complete in Sanctuary. It is the one, I believe, where you have to return the spicy pictures back to Moxie. Now, if you return those to Marcus, you get the lucrative opportunity, which is one of the worst items in the game, but you do want to turn those in to Moxie to get the heart rate. Now, it does shoot in a heart-shaped pattern, and it is a fire-locked weapon. It also has plus 50% crit damage and plus 2% lifesteal. Now, it cannot spawn with a scope, but it is not considered a null scope, so you do lose speed when you ADS. It's just an amazing weapon. The thinking is already a great weapon. This is a unique thinking. Great damage, great healing. The heart-shaped spread can make it a little hard to crit enemies with a lot of pellets, but it's still very good. It's easily an A tier weapon. I mean, arguably S tier. With that damage and that healing, yeah, you could maybe argue S tier. I think I'm going to go A tier for now, but I may change my mind on that one. All right, up next is the Hector's Paradise. So this is a quest reward for completing Echoes of the Past in the Commander Lilith DLC. So it is a shock-locked, bayonet-locked Hornet. It's just like the Hornet, so it's got equal stats. It's got the 80% grenade splash. It's literally just a shock and bayonet-locked Hornet. This was a controversial one. A lot of people were arguing about this in the community polls. It's honestly a tier worse than the Hornet whenever you look at actual practical gameplay. Like, the lack of element matching hurts it a lot. It's a lot worse for bossing, especially. It can still shred mobs in the right circumstances and depending on the character. But the problem with Shock, guys, is in practice, it's just always better to element match. The thing about Shock is, yes, it's more consistent, but it's worse. Like, there's almost never a situation where you would want to use Shock. And a lot of people, some people were defending this, some people were more critical of it. The people who were defending it were saying basically Shock is just as good as other elements. I completely disagree with that. And I think if you actually look at people's gameplay, whenever people have the opportunity to match elements, they do. So if you're running through Washburn, for example, which features a lot of shielded loaders, the Hornet is going to be significantly better. And most people would use the Hornet there over the Hector's Paradise. So the Shock is not bad. It's just there's not enough uses for it where there's not enough places where it's the best element to use. There's a few, but overall it's more niche than fire or corrosion, right? So Shock is weaker overall, but more consistent, but element matching is very simple and easy to do. So that's just a very bad trade-off in my opinion. Considering it's also bayonet locked, in my opinion, Hector's Paradise does deserve B tier, although I believe the second community poll was more A tier votes, although I think the first poll was B tier. Overall, in my opinion, it is a B tier weapon. If you compare the performance versus Hornet, the Hornet is going to perform significantly better, unless you go out of your way to intentionally play stupidly and, you know, fight like flesh enemies, in which case you're just not doing the basics of the game. All right, up next is the Hellfire. So the Hellfire does drop from Scorch and Digi-Scorch. It also drops from Sully the Blacksmith at 10% rate. The Hellfire is fire-locked, and it does have plus 50% grenade splash. Now, it is actually it's better than I remembered. It's pretty strong on Zero and Maya, and the grenade splash does help it on Axton. Overall, I don't think it's quite good enough to be A tier, but I do think it's good enough to be B tier. So, it's just another one of those weapons where it's pretty good. There's just not a lot to say about it. Solid B tier weapon. All right, up next is the Hive. Now, this is a really, really weird one to rank. It does drop from Saturn and Saturn 2.0 at a 3.3% rate, and it is corrosive locked. So the Hive shoots an orb that spawns Seeking Missiles, and these missiles do benefit fully from amp damage. Like I said, it's a very hard weapon to rank. It can deal great damage, but it also costs 4 ammo per shot. Gage can do some crazy stuff with Max Anarchy and Drunk Shotting. This is also the best weapon for doing the Rising Shot glitch. I demonstrated that in my Sniper Zero guide if you want to check that out. If you want to do the Rising Shot glitch, you can start a new level 30 Salvador, and I think he spawns with the level 30 Hive, so you would want a low level one for that purpose. So it's got massive potential, but it's not that practical in most usage scenarios. You need to be careful with where you place a shot. Like if you place it too close to a wall, a lot of the projectiles and the missiles will just like blow up on the wall and can't get to the enemies. I think I will give it B tier because while it's usually not super practical, it does have some amazing potential, and it can be good for loaders, but you gotta be really careful with how you use it. Overall, I think B tier is fair. While it does have SS tier niche, so I said before that most weapons that are good at raiding are really good outside of raiding. The Hive is kind of an exception. It is one where it can do some really crazy raiding stuff, like I said with Drunk Shotting and Anarchy. For most typical gameplay, it's kind of an awkward weapon. So it is a bit of an exception, but overall, I think B tier is fair for the Hive. All right, up next is the Hornet. Now, this does drop from Knuckle Dragger at a 10% rate and Hyperius at a 1.95% rate, and it does also world drop. So the Hornet is corrosive locked, and, just like Hector's Paradise, has plus 80% grenade splash. It's a very, very great weapon. This is a great weapon for Digistruct Peak since it's corrosive locked and it drops from Knuckle Dragger. It's super easy to farm, And like I said, guys, being able to be corrosive is a huge deal because you can take advantage of that 1.75 times multiplier that corrosive damage does, which is huge. So like I said, if you were to compare the Hornet versus the Hector's Paradise running through like Washburn, you'll see that the Hornet performs significantly better. So in my opinion, the Hornet is a tier above the Hector's Paradise because at its peak, it performs significantly better. So Hornet is a solid A tier weapon, arguably S tier. You could argue S tier. I think I'm going to go with A tier for this one though. All right, up next is the Hot Mama. So Lieutenant Hoffman drops this at a 20% rate in the Commander Lilith DLC. Now, it's a weird one because Lieutenant Hoffman just drops the sniper he has equipped. So if you go in there and he's shooting those E-Tech hearts at you, he's got it. His drops are bugged otherwise, and you can't actually keep the sniper he drops unless it's the Hot Mama because some of the data is messed up. But it's a fire-locked Jacob Sniper, which is awesome, because it's a Jacob Sniper you can use a Bone of the Ancients with, which is amazing. It also has perfect accuracy when scoped in, so if you get like the drunk effect, all the shots will land on top of each other. I think some people like to use this with Gauge, although I think it still has a lot of sway if your anarchy is too high. It also has a crit stacking mechanic similar to the Morningstar. Every critical hit grants plus 50% crit damage for 12 seconds, but you can only gain stacks every 5 seconds. Now, it does also flirt with you, which is nice if you're down bad. Not me, though. I'm a 0 main. Overall, it's an amazing weapon. Easy to farm, fire locked, so you don't have to worry about that. It's a very, very good weapon. It's an S tier weapon, honestly. The only thing it lacks is rating potential. It's amazing for mobbing, amazing for bossing, an S tier weapon, in my opinion. Once you get that damage going with the crit stacking effect, it's so good. All right, up next is the Hydra. So Rouge does drop it at a 33% rate in the big game hunt. Now, the Hydra shoots 5 even groups in a line, so it's amazing for loaders and wide enemies. Sometimes it's harder to use on smaller enemies, but from my play testing, as long as you're at like point blank range, it's still really, really good. Oh, it also has plus 50% crit damage. Like I said, yeah, if you're closer up, it will work better on smaller targets as well. I was considering going B tier until I one-shot an ultimate badass lunatic with this thing. Now, I think it was with the Two-Fang proc, but still, that's crazy. I just think it's too strong to be B tier. It does seem like for a lot of these multi-pellet weapons, they spawn really close together, no matter how bad the spread is, allowing you to deal massive damage at point blank range. So considering that, I think it does deserve A tier. All right, up next is the Infection. Now this drops from Veracitus and Triple O at a 0.5% rate. It drops from Deciduous at a 1.5% rate, and you can also get it in the Grotto Seraph shop. Now the Infection is corrosive locked. It does deal plus 80% grenade splash. I think Krieg players like this for some kind of stacking something on it, not really sure. I know Axton and Maya have decent builds for it, but in general, it sucks and I hate it. Personally, I feel it's D tier, though it's arguably C tier. I'll give it C tier since it does have a few builds that can make it better. In general, it's terrible though, and is arguably a D tier weapon. The only thing is like with the double accessory against loaders, and it does have some niche builds that arguably put it just up above D tier. Although, you know, you wouldn't get an argument from me if you said it was D tier. All right, up next is going to be the Infection Cleaner. So the new Pandora soldiers and Lieutenant Angvar and also Lieutenant Tetra all have a 0.9% chance to drop this. Now, it is a fire-locked, slightly buffed Avenger, has a little bit more damage. Just like the Avenger, it regens SMG ammo, and Axton can deal massive damage to Veracitus and Tiberius with this weapon. You would want to use it over the Avenger because it does have a little bit more damage. So it deserves the same tier as the Avenger. It's as like a straight shooting SMG, it's actually pretty good. Just like with the Avenger, I'm going to give it A tier, though you could definitely argue S tier. I think in the end, I don't know. I mean, you've got to consider a weapon that can do so much damage to Hyperius and especially Veracitus. But the reason I'm not weighting that a ton is because that's only on one character. That's only for Axton. So it's hard to say. I think for now, I will give it A tier though. But if you said S tier, I wouldn't disagree with you. All right, up next is going to be the Infinity. So Lieutenant Angvar drops this at a 12.5% rate. The Golden Golem drops it at a 1.95% rate. The Tubby Bones, Doc Mercy, and Digistruck Mercy all drop it at a 10% rate. And it does also world drop. So it does come in every element but slag, interestingly enough, and it does not consume ammo. It shoots in a sideways 8 pattern. There's no other name for that, by the way. Now, it's really good on 0 with a legendary sniper comp to boost 1 shot, 1 kill, and precision to 10 points. Because the spread is horrible since it does shoot in that sideways 8 pattern. It kind of annoys me because the non-unique version is the Anarchist, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game, a Vladoff pistol with a Vladoff barrel. And the legendary Anarchist just having infinite ammo and bad accuracy kind of sucks because pistols don't really struggle with ammo consumption that much anyway. So while I'm not a huge fan of this gun, it is good. The community polls consistently underrated it. You know, like I said, a lot of people were kind of biased with their votes. Like the Infinity deserves A tier, no doubt. Like just because other people overrate it, that is not a good reason to downgrade the Infinity, right? It is objectively a good weapon. It doesn't consume ammo, which is nice. And on 0 in particular, it's devastating. 0 with this, with the legendary sniper, like I said, melts bosses. I killed Wilhelm in like 7 seconds with it. So even though I'm not a huge fan of it, I have to admit it is very good. So it absolutely deserves A tier, considering it's good on basically all characters. Well, I think Gage has anti-synergy with it, where one of her skills will make you not be able to use it unless you have a certain class mod. But in general, it's good. And then on 0, it's incredible, and it has infinite ammo utility. So overall, I got to give it A tier. All right, up next is the Interfacer. So Veracitus drops this at a 50% rate. Triple O drops it at a 0.5% rate. Unless you fast travel to Candlerax Crag and Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, that will make Triple O drop it at a 50% rate, and Dexy at a 1.5% rate. Now, the Interfacer has plus 60% critical damage, and it does spawn extra unlisted projectiles that converge on the main projectiles. Now, the Interfacer cannot spawn with the scope, so you don't lose movement speed when you ADS, which is nice. The Interfacer is just an absolute DPS monster. I think everyone knows that. It does come in all elements. Now, I believe with Axton skill expertise, you can actually move faster with a weapon like this drawn when you're ADSing, you know what I mean? It's just an amazing weapon. Amazing for mobbing, amazing for bossing. It's even amazing for raiding. So easily SS tier. All right, up next is the Invader. So Saturn and Saturn 2.0 both drop this at a 3.3% rate. It does also world drop. Now, the Invader fires bullets in a 5-round burst with a plus 700% fire rate when you scope in. Now, there is a bug that makes the recoil reduction not apply, but you can bypass this if you wait for 2 seconds to shoot. It does come in all elements. It's a fairly underrated weapon. It has great DPS, but just poor ammo efficiency, and it can be unwieldy. It can be kind of hard to land all of the shots in the burst as crits. Loaders are really easy to snipe, or just big enemies or bosses with big crit spots. And also, Maya can hold the enemies still to easily snipe them. You can also descope early to end the burst, and it is a top 5 DPS sniper, or at least pre-Commander Lilith it was. So it honestly deserves A tier. The only real downside is the ammo consumption, but, you know, damage-wise, all things considered, you know, range-wise, it is definitely an A tier weapon. Up next is the Jolly Roger. So you do get this for completing just desserts for Desert Deserters and the Captain Scarlet DLC. It does come in all elements. Now, the Jolly Roger is a top 5 DPS shotgun. It's actually really, really good. Now, it also shoots in a skull and bones pattern, which is what a Jolly Roger is. And this is nice because, weirdly enough, a skull is kind of shaped like a head, so you can actually land a lot of pellets as critical hits. So it's an amazing shotgun. Like I said, most bandit shotguns are good. This is one of the best bandit shotguns. It's easily an A tier weapon. Yeah, you know what? Looking at other A tier weapons, I think I am going to bump the Jolly Roger up to S tier. It is indeed that good. Massive single shot damage, actually a pretty good fire rate, and massive magazine. Yeah, plus, you know, better accuracy, easy to land all shots as crits. I honestly think it's an S tier weapon, one of the highest damage shotguns in the game. Now, the non-unique version is a room cleaner, which I think the room cleaner has almost like basically equal damage, but just worse accuracy. So that skull and bones pattern does help it a lot. So yeah, I'm actually going to give it low S tier. All right, up next is the Judge. So this does drop from One and Digistruct One at 33% rate. Now, the Judge has plus 30% crit damage, although you don't really feel it. It's a hard one to rank because it feels pretty inconsistent. The snappy reload does make it fun to use, though, but it's honestly a very weak weapon. I'm going to say B tier, but I honestly think, realistically, it's going to perform more in C tier range. All right, up next is the Kerblaster. So Midgemong and the Handsome Sorcerer both drop this at a 10% rate during the story kill. The Handsome Sorcerer drops it at a 0.3% rate otherwise. It is also available in the Torgvander at a 16.7% rate. Now, the Kerblaster shoots projectiles that explode and spawn a child grenade. The initial projectile deals pure splash. The child grenade deals plus 100% grenade splash. It can be good, but you need enemies to not move around too much or the damage drops off. Honestly, like, this is one of the most consistently overrated weapons in the game. I'm sorry, guys. Like, the community polls kept voting in A tier. It honestly just does not compete with other A tier weapons, especially against bossing. It drops off so hard bossing against other A tier weapons. Like, the only possible saving grace of the Kerblaster is the fact that it can hit multiple enemies at once, but like being explosive locked, and like weaker, you really want an explosive relic to boost the damage, which means giving up your, Bone of the Ancients. And then, you probably want to use a singularity or something to bunch enemies together to make them actually all be hit. It's honestly just fairly overrated in my opinion. I think if you compare it to other B tier weapons, or excuse me, other A tier weapons, most of the time those weapons are going to outperform it significantly. Again, especially against bossing. At bossing, it just could not do anything. So I'm sorry, guys. I know people. I mean, I like the weapon too, guys. It's a fun weapon, but like outside of the niche of using it against slow moving enemies that you can bunch together, it just gets outperformed by other A tier weapons. So I'm sorry, guys. It pains me to say it, but I have to give the Kerblaster B tier. B tier doesn't mean bad, guys. It just means not as good as other A tier weapons. All right, up next is going to be the Kitten. So this is obtained as a quest reward for completing Everybody Wants to Be Wanted in the campaign of Carnage. So the Kitten does shoot in a smiley face pattern, so you want to use it at very close range. It does come in every element, except it cannot be non-elemental, which is nice. Now, I really recommend avoiding the Wild accessory, which makes the spread much worse. That is the Rabid prefix. I prefer Ferocious, which is damage prefix. Zero's Precision skill is also great for it for tightening the spread. It's so devastating at close range, guys, although it will, drop off at long range, of course. So something I wanted to mention, the Jacob's sight, like shotguns, reduces the spread by 50% when sighting in. So for shotguns and assault rifles like this, if you can get the Jacob's sight, it will give a lot of spread reduction when scoping in. So I highly recommend keeping a lookout for that. It's got great damage. It's got good healing. And it's just got a very small downside of poor range, And the healing is 4%. So considering great healing, great damage, I honestly, it deserves low S tier. Like if it only had the damage, it would be A tier, but also the healing makes it S tier. The range is a downside. The thing is, I don't punish it that much for that, because if this was a shotgun, no one would think to do that. Like, it's basically a poorly classed weapon. It's a shotgun in assault rifle form. It's a high rate of fire, low damage per shot shotgun. Considering the amazing healing and damage, I've got to give it low S tier. All right, and here's the updated tier list. I did decide to move Heartbreaker to S tier. I mean, it's just got great damage, great healing, the reverse recoil and everything. I think it does deserve low S tier. Also decided to bump the Devastator down to high C tier because Even though it does have better damage potential than C tier, it's just so unwieldy and annoying to actually use that I think C tier is fair. Also, the community poll was C tier, so I think that's fair. Also, I just added the buffalo myself. I didn't remember that I could do that, so we just threw the buffalo. So the buffalo's on there now, right ahead of the elephant gun. Also decided to go ahead and bump Babymaker up to S tier, simply because like it's just too good at dealing with annoying enemies, you know, witch doctors, skeletons, and when you build around it, you can do crazy damage with it. I think it's just too good to be A tier, honestly. Being good at things that other weapons aren't is a big deal in my opinion, so I'm gonna put it in S tier. All right, so heading into the next weapon, we have the Lady Fist. So you get this for completing the Uncle Teddy side quest. You do have to side with his niece, not with Hyperion. If you side with Hyperion, you get the tidal wave, which is kind of weird. You have to side against Hyperion to get the Hyperion Lady Fist. Anyway, the Lady Fist does come in all elements, and it does deal plus 800% critical damage. The Lady Fist is obviously really good with the P-Shield. Everyone loves using it with the B-Shield. And it even has raid applications. You can use it to knock down Hatteracks and stuff like that. Amazing weapon. It does come in all elements. It has amazing range. You know, I keep talking about how range is one of the most important things in this game for survivability. So having great damage, great range, comes in all elements. Amazing with the B. Good for mobbing, bossing, raid bossing. It's got everything, right? So an easy SS tier weapon is the Lady Fist. All right, up next is the Landscaper. So you get this from the Clan Wars questline in the Dust. Now, it shoots 4 sticky mines that explode on enemy impacts, dealing 85% explosive grenade splash damage. The mines have a plus 150% pure splash damage. So this is a weapon, it's pretty easy to kill yourself, so be careful of that. Now, if you can get the proper distance, the damage is surprisingly good. Like, I wouldn't say it's a good weapon, but it's not as horrible as people often make it out to be under the right circumstances. Like, it's pretty fun to use against loaders. If you get the spacing just right, you can like crit all of their crit spots at once. It's pretty cool, deals pretty good damage. Overall, it's not consistent enough to be B tier though, in my opinion. So while I do think it's, I mean, it's a little bit better than community perception, it's not a great weapon. Overall, I think C tier is fair for it. All right, up next is the lovely Lascox, or the Lasco as some people say. So the Lascox always spawns in the pond in Frostburn Canyon. So it does fire bullets in the shape of a bull, which is a reference to some kind of cave paintings. I think there's some of the earliest cave paintings we have found. Now, the Lasco does have a 60% chance to shoot twice, and it is unfortunately locked to non-elemental. It's still good, but if it could have an element, it would be one of the best SMGs in the game. I think people sometimes underestimate the importance of element matching. It's just, realistically, people will say that like non-elemental is more consistent, and that is sort of true. You're almost always in a situation where it's better to just use the best tool for the job, right? You are rarely in a situation where you will come out ahead if you use a tool that is worse everywhere, but a little bit better at its worst part. You know what I mean? So it's almost always better just to match elements and swap when you need to, because you don't have to swap that much. Like most areas that have bandits, it's mostly just flesh enemies. Most areas that have loaders, it's mostly just armored enemies. So realistically, being element locked to not fire or not corrosive is a big deal. And like I said, the Lasco is still pretty good. It's just, like I said, it would be top tier if it could have an element. Now, it shoots a variable burst between 9 and 14 rounds. A lot of people have told me they prefer this weapon hip-fired. I haven't really had that experience. I've found that it works better ADSing, but maybe that's just me. It was a bit of a hard one to rank. We conducted multiple polls. They went back and forth between C tier and B tier. It's very good on Zero and Maya. Like, Zero can tighten the spread of the burst. Like, it has horrible spread, which is another kind of thing working against it. It's very good on them, though. Axton's Duty Calls can actually help it a lot, because it boosts the damage and fire rate of non-elemental weapons. And I think overall it is good enough to be B tier, you know. Depending on the character, it might feel a little bit worse than that, and it can really drop off on tankier targets. I do not recommend bossing with it, but overall I think B tier is fair for the Lascox. Next up is the Law. You get this from the Won't Get Fooled Again quest. Now, the Law is one of the interesting weapons where it's a quest reward that is also obtainable somewhere else. So it also drops from the Sheriff of Lynchwood at an 11% rate. There's only a few items in the game like that. So the Law is obviously a Jacob's pistol, but it also has the unique effect of having plus 100% melee damage. And when you pair it with the Order Shield, melee attacks will heal you. Now, as a straight shooting gun, it's actually pretty good. It was surprising me. Now, it's not amazing or anything, like it's no Maggie, but I think considering the melee utility and the strength of it as a straight shooting gun, it's at least B tier and arguably A tier. I'm not really sure where I'm going to land with this one. I think for now I'm going to stick to B tier, simply because while it does have the melee utility as well, the problem is even for the melee utility, it's really not that good, because most of the time you would want to just use, you know, a bladed ruby or something, which would have overall healing. Remember, with the Law, you only heal off of direct melee attacks. Whereas if you have like a bladed ruby, for example, you'll heal off of everything. Grenade damage, kunai damage, whatever. That said, it's pretty, like, it's strong. You can definitely make a good build with the Law and Order, and I do want to cover that at some point. So I think for now, I think I'm actually going to say A tier for that. I'm leaning between A and B tier. I think I'm actually going to give the Law A tier, considering its damage as a regular pistol. I mean, based off just the pistol damage, it's B tier, but considering the synergy with Order, I'm going to give it A tier for now. All right, baby. Up next is the Lead Storm. Oh, I love this thing so much. So this drops from Veracitus and Triple O at a 0.5% rate, Deciduous at a 1.5% rate, and it is also obtainable in the Grotto Seraph shop. So the Lead Storm is one of the best weapons in the game. I only recently discovered how good this thing is, and I fell in love with it. It's amazing for mobbing. It's amazing for bossing. It's even good for raid bossing. It does come in all elements. It's got unlisted projectiles for B abuse. So what the Lead Storm does is it shoots arcing bullets that split into 3. It has a 35% chance to fire twice, and it has plus 30% crit damage. So it's an amazing weapon. Now, you usually want to avoid like the Swift prefix and the Rabid prefix. Ferocious is my favorite, which is damage. Avoid velocity and accelerate if you want to sweet spot. It's neck and neck with the Hell. I really struggle ranking these. I think it'll ultimately come down to preference. The healing on the Hell plus the level of damage is amazing, though the Lead Storm is easier to sweet spot with. I do find I like raiding with the Lead Storm more. If you take away raiding, I would definitely just prefer the Hell, but like it's much easier to kill Hatterax with the Lead Storm. Now that said, the Hell is really good at raid bossing too. Overall, it's just an amazing weapon. Whichever one you like better, they're both top tier. So, you know, I have no choice but to give the Lead Storm SS tier. That might sound crazy to some people, but I would recommend checking out my weapon review of it if that does seem crazy, because it is genuinely that good. All right, up next is the Little Eevee. So, Lil Sis in the Captain Scarlet DLC gives it to you if you kill Mr. Bubbles. Now, it shoots arcing projectiles that deal 80% gun splash. Killing an enemy with the Little Eevee will grant you plus 70% action skill cooldown rate for 60 seconds, while critical kills will grant 130%. So that's really cool. That effect is really good. Now, you can glitch this for immediate action skill cooldown. I show how to do that in my top 3 unique zero builds video if you want to check that out. Now, the Little Eevee is shock locked. The damage is decent for mobbing. It's not fantastic. For Axton, you can like swap to it quickly to finish an enemy off, ideally with the crit. To help since he has a long action skill cooldown. I just say him in particular because I only play him, Maya, and Axton and Zero. I mean, the other 2 characters have short action skill cooldown, but if your character has a long action skill cooldown, what you could do is, you know, if you're about to finish an enemy off, you can kill them with a Little Eevee to get that better cooldown, which is really, really good. The DPS potential is not amazing, but considering the effect, I think B tier is fair, and that was also the result of the community poll. All right, up next is one of Alpha's favorite weapons, the Logan's Gun. Now, it does drop from Wilhelm at a 5% rate, and it is fire locked. Most of you probably know of the Logan's Gun because people like to use a low-level version to regen rocket ammo. It is very good for that. So it does also deal Pure Splash, so Krieg can really get the damage going with this thing. Now, even outside of Krieg, the damage can actually be pretty good, but you need the enemies to cooperate a bit. You need the enemies to stand still and not move around too much. Since it is highly dependent on enemy cooperation, I'm only going to give it C tier. Now, I think you could argue B tier considering the ammo regen utility, but there's a lot of weapons in the game that can do that, so I'm not going to favor that a ton. Overall, the damage itself is above C tier, but it's just the fact that, again, you need cooperation out of the enemies to do it. So I think overall C tier is fair for Logan's Gun. All right, up next is one of my favorite snipers, the Longbow. So this does drop from the Badass Creeper in the Minecraft Easter egg area in Caustic Caverns at a 6.25% rate, as well as the Blockhead. You'll have a chance to get either one of those. So the Longbow, like the Blockhead, is fire locked. It also has plus 50% critical damage, which is really, really nice. Now, the Longbow fires like Minecraft arrows that slightly drop as they fly through the air. Now, it also cannot spawn with a sight, so the critical hit accessory is the best accessory you can get for it, in my opinion. It's an amazing weapon, guys. It hits so hard. I think it actually, on flesh targets, pretty much equals the Amigo Sincero for single shot damage. That is pretty crazy, right? To match the Amigo Sincero for damage shot for shot is pretty crazy. So the Longbow honestly earns S tier. It's not going to be SS tier because the Amigo Sincero overall is definitely better. But, you know, still, the Longbow is amazing in its own right. Easily an S tier weapon. All right, up next is the Lyuda, baby. So Gettle in the Good, the Bad, and the Mordecai quest drops this at a 10% rate in the Dust. It does also world drop. Now, the Lyuda has a plus 25% critical hit modifier, and when you shoot the round, it splits into 3. They're unlisted, so every single round gets full amp damage. One of the best weapons ever, arguably best weapon in the game. The sweet spot damage is just absurd. You guys have seen some of my speedruns. I've got the Terramorphous speedrun world record with Sniper Zero, 19 seconds by abusing that sweet spot. Almost a sub 1 minute kill on the dragons, around a 30-ish second kill on Pete. It can just do such insane stuff because it's not that hard to sweet spot with either. It's kind of unnecessary for mobbing, but for bossing, the thing is, because it shoots so fast, you can dial in the range like as you're moving. It's got a big magazine and it shoots fast, so you can easily correct the range like as you're shooting it, right? Now, it does come in all elements, and it's got great single shot damage, guys. Like, I'm sorry. This is such a rage bait take that the Lyuda is bad for mobbing. So many people say this. I've got to see your fucking gameplay if you think this weapon is bad for mobbing, because it's not. Guys, just because a weapon has a high fire rate doesn't mean you gotta see shit and just start spraying everywhere, okay? You don't gotta just start spraying everywhere like you just saw, you know, Stacy's mom or whatever. It's got great single shot damage. Now, if you're fighting a tankier target, sure, let that fire rate go. But in general, you don't have to just spray and pray. So, Lyuda, one of the best weapons in the game, amazing on every character, amazing at everything, amazing for mobbing, bossing, raid bossing. So, just an overall amazing weapon. Easily an SS tier weapon. If anything is SS tier, it's the Lyuda. And again, this is kind of what I'm talking about, why I'm prioritizing raid bossing so much, because pretty much everything that is really good at raid bossing is really good outside of it, as is the Lyuda. All right, up next is the M2828 Thompson. So this is found in the grave in the Dahl Abandon at a 6.8% rate. This is in the Commander Lilith DLC. Now, the Thompson is obviously a power crept hammer buster. It's a significantly stronger hammer buster, especially the magazine size is absurd. This thing has like a 60 plus round magazine. It's really, really good. The thing is with the Thompson, if you cannot get a Bekah, the Thompson is a very good alternative. It's not as good. It's definitely a discount Bekah, but like on Zero in particular, with velocity, this thing is so amazing. Very comparable to the Bekah, unless you can sweet spot with the Bekah with velocity, then the Bekah destroys it. But overall, the Thompson is amazing. If you've always wanted a Bekah, but you just can't get one, I highly recommend picking this weapon up. Like I said, it's definitely a discount Bekah, but it's you know, in the same league. Well, I would say it's a tier below. It's a discount 1 tier below Bekah, so I'm going to give it solid A tier. All right, up next is the Madhouse. So Mad Dog does drop the Madhouse at a 10% rate in Lynchwood, and also the Madhouse world drops. The projectiles will randomly break out in different directions, left, right, up, or down. The projectiles split into 2 on impact and start bouncing. Now, the Madhouse is not good in most situations, but it does have a niche. So, like Maya with chain reaction, when you have them bunched up or near walls, is surprisingly good. A guy named Squeak Cheesetaker has done a video on this. I think he said it's pretty good with Gauge. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'll show the footage. Like you can see, it's surprisingly good. This is one of my favorite things about this game, guys. Like I'm not saying the game is perfect. I'm not saying every single weapon is super strong. There's a lot of underwhelming weapons that need buffs, but one of my favorite, I mean, I don't even know if I would say they need buffs, because one of my favorite things about this game is taking the quote unquote weak weapons like the Madhouse and finding out how to make them strong, you know? So it's honestly a very fun weapon to use. Like I said, you do need to use it in certain specific situations for it to be good, and that's classic C tier territory, right? So it's too consistently good to be D tier. Other D tier weapons won't be good as in, you know, in this amount of scenarios. So overall, it does earn C tier. All right, up next is the Maggie. So Mick Zafford does drop this in the Dust at a 10% rate, and it world drops. I feel like I forgot to mention a lot of the world drops. I'm sorry, guys. There's so much freaking information to double check here. Anyway, the Maggie fires 6 bullets for 1 ammo, and people have told me it has increased bullet speed, but Loot Lemon makes no mention of this, so I'm not sure if that's true. Now, I really like the Maggie on Zero with a legendary sniper comm for 10 points in precision to tighten the spread, but it gives it better range. Now, the Maggie does outdamage the Greed, even on flesh targets. And obviously on non-flesh targets, it will for sure. I think if the Maggie misses 1 or 2 projectiles, then the Greed will win. But overall, the Maggie is very good. I found that some people were underrating it. Like the community polls kept voting it B tier. Honestly, the Maggie is A tier. The Maggie is very good. It's just a very consistent weapon. I guess the only kind of downside is bad range, because you do need to be close up to land all the projectiles. But as long as you do, you know, it's got good damage, good fire rate. In my opinion, the Maggie is an A tier weapon. Not super high into A tier. I would say it's low A tier, but it's A tier for sure. All right, up next is the Mongol. So Dukino's mom and the Digistruct version both drop this at a 5% rate, and it does also world drop. Now, the Mongol does come in all elements, and for 2 ammo per shot, it fires a round that releases smaller rockets in all directions. Now, something that holds the weapon back, in my opinion, is the fact that the bonus rounds are always explosive. If they could match the element, I think it would make the weapon significantly better. So the damage is pretty good. It's just too unwieldy and ammo expensive. Like for mobs, it can be a little bit hard to line up the shot right. In my opinion, I mean, you can do it, but just considering it's 2 ammo per shot. Now, the way I like to use it is for bosses. Like for larger bosses, this thing can deal a lot of damage to them. It can kill them very quickly. Also, if enemies are bunched close together, like it's another one where like if you got your spacing right and there's a lot of enemies together, you can kill a lot of enemies with it, you know. But outside of that, I like it for bossing. Now, Alpha has reviewed this this weapon if you want to get another look at it. It's pretty good. Like I said, for bossing overall, it's not amazing in my opinion, but it can kill large bosses pretty quickly. I tried it with a fire bone and an explosive relic. I think I'd recommend the explosive relic no matter what, since it boosts the child missiles, you know, regardless of element. It just feels like such a huge missed opportunity to not make those child grenades match the element. It would just be, then it would be probably A tier. But in my opinion, it's just not consistently good enough for A tier. I think B tier is fair. All right, up next is the Morning Star. So this is a quest reward for completing Hyperion Contract 873 and Overlook. Now, the Morning Star does come in all elements. It does talk, kind of insults you and stuff, or belittles you. It has one of the most powerful glitches ever. I showed how to do this glitch in my Ancient Dragons farming video, if you want to check that out. Anything that you can land a critical hit on, that glitch will let you destroy it. Now, the Morningstar does have a crit stacking mechanic. This is what the Hot Mama was based on. So each critical hit grants plus 60% critical damage for 24 seconds, but stacks can only be gained every 5 seconds. So once you actually get the max amount of stacks, it's very, very powerful. In my Sniper's tier list, I ranked it B tier because I underestimated its power with this. Honestly, it deserves A tier. Like, I'm not counting the glitch that much. I mean, I'll give it some bonus points for the glitch, but honestly, even without the glitch, the damage potential at max stacks of the effect is really, really strong. Now, for mobbing, you probably won't always be able to maintain max stacks, but like for bossing, it's pretty easy. So in my opinion, it does deserve A tier. I'd highly recommend trying this thing out. Just remember, plus 60% critical damage every time you land a critical hit. That lasts for 24 seconds, but you can only get a stack every 5 seconds. So once you're maintaining, you know, around 4 stacks of that, you know, that's really, really good. Definitely A tier in my opinion. All right, up next is the Nirvana. So the infected badass saplings do drop this at a 1% rate. It is fire locked. It deals plus 50% grenade splash. It's a surprisingly good weapon. Now, it might sound familiar. That's because it's, as far as I know, literally identical to the Hellfire. I don't think they have any differences at all. So if you like the Hellfire, you'll probably like this weapon. It's very strong on Zero and Maya. The grenade splash again helps it on Axton. I think it's a solid B tier weapon. All right, up next is the Norfleet. So as we all know, Vermivorous drops the Norfleet at a 20% rate. Hyperius also drops it at a 1.67% rate. So the Norfleet does come in all elements. Now it fires 3 plasma projectiles that explode on impact. After the initial explosion, plasma projectiles deal an extra 50% damage in a radius 4 times larger than the original explosion. So if you just want the most amount of damage right now on one single trigger pull, it's the Norfleet. It does consume 3 ammo per shot though. So even at max ammo for rocket launchers, which is 33, you only get 11 shots, right? Also, why is the red text on this weapon orange? Why is the shade of red on the red text orange? I don't understand that. Now, obviously you can sham fleet to regen ammo, or you can use the Big Boom Blaster. Now the Norfleet is ridiculous with the drunk effect, of course. I had an older video where I beat every raid boss legitimately with 0 without using Gibbed Gear. And beating Veracitus with melee 0 was obviously very tough without Gibbed Gear. I ended up doing it, but it took a lot longer, mainly because I only had a fire Topnia. I did not have a fire Norfleet. The problem was, a lot of the times, the badass savages would not be close enough for me to get a second wind easily. What I found was that whenever I went to redo that fight with Gibbed Gear for my speedrun, I found it was a lot easier to get second winds because the Norfleet was just better than the Topnia at dropping like a massive amount of damage right now. So that's kind of an example of the niche that the Norfleet has. Obviously, again, it's not ammo efficient, but as far as one trigger pull, for massive damage, it's the best, right? Now you can do some raid bossing with it. I think Gage likes to, you know, max Anarchy, maybe drunk sham fleet with it. I'm pretty sure it's also just amazing for second wins, and it just hits hard. You know, it's just an amazing weapon. One of the best weapons in the game, arguably the best rocket launcher in the game, depending on what you favor. So easily an SS tier weapon. All right, up next is the Nukem. So the Black Queens and the Digi Black Queens drop this at a 10% rate. The Torgvinder will have it at a 16.7% rate, and it does world drop. So the Nukem fires an arcing projectile that explodes in a large radius. It does consume 2 ammo per shot. I'll be honest, I'm not crazy about this weapon. It deals decent damage in a large area, but no element matching, no bone. It's basically a side grade of the Ahab. Like both can one-shot mobs, but the Ahab has better ammo efficiency while Nukem has better range and blast radius. It just doesn't deal enough damage to justify the 2 ammo per shot, especially with a lack of elements. Like the World Burn makes this thing feel a lot worse because the World Burn has 1 ammo per shot, a 6 mag, so it can shoot 6 times. I think, what can the Nukem shoot? Twice? Maybe 3 times max before reloading? I mean, I'm underselling it. Like, it's a good, don't get me wrong, the Nukem is a good rocket launcher. That sounded overly harsh. I'm just not crazy about it. I think it's a solid B tier weapon though. If it only consumed 1 ammo per shot, I would probably bump it up to A tier because then would get more shots before having to reload. For a rocket launcher, guys, the amount of shots you can do before having to reload is a huge deal to me. So that's why I'm kind of harsh on it. It is a solid B tier weapon though. All right, up next is the Octo. So this is obtained from the Slap Happy side quest in the Highlands Outwash. Now the Octo does come in all elements, and it fires a 3x3 bullet grid that expands and contracts. So The Yonko's a pretty good weapon. I'll be honest, I don't really like the way it feels. Something about it I just don't really like. It is decent though. I think the community polls were on the line for B or C tier for this weapon. I think it leaned towards B tier, and I do think that's fair. You can also kind of use it at a better range if you can sweet spot with it. So it's not a useless weapon or anything. It's just not one that I'm personally crazy about. It's definitely decent though. It's a solid B tier shotgun. Not much more to say about it than that. All right, up next is the Ogre. So Warlord Slog in the Badass Magic Slaughter does have a 21.45% chance to drop this. So good luck getting it because that shit sucks ass even if you're doing glitches. It's a brutal farm. Now, the Ogre does have plus 90% grenade splash. It has a 25% chance to fire twice. And every 6 seconds, the Ogre has a 23% chance to buff the Warlord for 6 seconds, dealing plus 20% damage, plus 50% fire rate, plus 100% reload speed, an additional 50% double shot chance for a total of 75%, and the projectiles ricochet. Now, swapping does reset the chance delay for the buff, and the buff does persist through swapping to another weapon. So that's a pretty cool effect of it. It's good. Like, the Ogre is good for sure. It's just not worth the farm. Similar to the Twister, like they're both really good, but just not good enough for how much of a pain in the ass they are to get. Like they're both good, but they should be top 10 weapons in the game when they're definitely not that. So overall though, it's definitely like even without the effect active, it's good. With the effect, it's very, very good. But I do think it deserves A tier. I think if it was more, if you could more reliably proc the effect, it could arguably be S tier. But overall, I think A tier is fair. All right, up next is the Omen, baby. So this does drop from the Ancient Dragons of Destruction at a 33.3% rate. Now, the Omen is weird because it's extremely likely to be fire, shock, corrosive, or slag, and it only has like a 1% chance to be non-elemental. Weirdly, it can't have a vertical grip. Does anybody know why? I don't know if that's just something Gearbox decided, because I'm pretty sure the non-unique version can have a vertical grip, right? But it can't have one. I would go for the critical hit accessory, which is the Royal prefix. It does have plus 100% grenade splash. It's just an amazing weapon, guys. The Omen is so, so good. It's one of the few weapons that's really good as a straight shooting gun and as a chucking weapon. Like, you don't really have to build around it to get decent chucking damage out of it, and it performs as a shotgun, like one of the best shotguns in the game. Top 5 shotgun DPS, so that's interesting. Now, I would recommend using this weapon at point blank range. Like, I see people try to stand far away and sort of make the projectiles converge. I would recommend not doing that. I would recommend just using it at point blank range, and it deals massive damage. It's honestly an S tier weapon. It is that good, and considering the chuck, in my opinion, S tier weapon. All right, up next is the Orc. So this is a reward for completing the Magic Slaughter. Now, the Orc does come in all elements, and like the Ogre, every 6 seconds, there's a 23% chance to buff the wielder for 6 seconds, which it gains plus 1 projectile, plus 20% damage, plus 50% fire rate, plus 100% reload speed, plus 50% double shot chance, and projectiles ricochet once and split in 2. So the Orc was a little bit better than I expected, even without the effect, but it's not good enough without the effect to be a very good weapon, in my opinion. Now, I think with this one, I think the community polls were split C tier and B tier, and I kind of am on the line with it too. I think because of the effect, I'll give it B tier. Without the effect, again, it's a very underwhelming weapon, but I think that's just enough to make it B tier for me personally. All right, up next is the Orphan Maker. So you do get this for completing the Message in a Bottle in Oasis quest. So it's a highly part-dependent weapon. I've talked about this before in the past, how for the most part, specific parts don't make a huge difference. Well, shotguns that have a low number of projectiles are an exception, obviously. So, and again, guys, I'm ranking these weapons considering perfect parts. Now, the Orphan Maker, you ideally want a Jacob's grip and a vertical grip, so do keep that in mind. Now, every shot deals 5% self damage. Unless you're playing Zero, you can sometimes bypass that with Two-Fang if Two-Fang activates. I'm not crazy about it on Zero, though, simply because Zero already has enough damage. He doesn't need to use a shotgun that inflicts self damage, to deal good damage. Even if it's only 5%, it'll interrupt your shield, and there's a lot of times it just gets in the way. I really do not like this shotgun. I think it has raiding uses with Salvador, and I think Gauge players like it a lot. I'm just not a big fan of it. I won't deny that it does hit really hard. I just really hate the self damage, and I just feel like there's too many other top tier shotguns that deal great damage and don't hurt yourself, right? Honestly, the Orphan Maker doesn't hit hard enough for having self damage, in my opinion. It should be like #1 or at least like top 3 damage. No, it should just be #1. If it's going to deal self damage, it needs to have a massive upside for that. Overall, I'm not crazy about it. I was thinking A tier. I guess I'm going to have to give it S tier considering it does have like the rating utility and stuff. I don't think it earns SS tier, even though it does technically have rating potential. It's just got too many other downsides with the self damage, in my opinion. So I'll give the Orphan Maker S tier. I'm not a big fan of it though. All right, up next is the Overcompensator, baby. So you do get this from the Chief Executive Overlord quest in the Commander Lilith DLC. Now, the Overcompensator does come in all elements, but unfortunately it is locked to the shotgun shell accessory. So it is basically a butcher that cannot have the vertical grip, so it's a massive downgrade versus the butcher. So obviously the butcher has 3 projectiles. Getting the vertical grip takes it to having 5 projectiles, which is a big bonus. So the overcompensator only having 3 projectiles it's a lot worse. Now that said, the overcompensator is still a very good weapon, guys. It's still a really good weapon. Just like the butcher, it has the 16.7% chance to add 2 rounds to the magazine rather than consuming 1. I'm pretty sure it's like completely identical to the butcher except for the accessory. But you'll see the footage on screen. The overcompensator is still a good weapon. The butcher is just a fucking amazing weapon. It's just so good that even without the vertical grip, it's still good. With the vertical grip, the butcher is S tier. Without the vertical grip, it's A tier. And that's what the overcompensator is. It's a non-vertical grip butcher, so it's an A tier weapon. All right, up next is the Patriot, baby. Now this is going to be a controversial one. This is a very hated on weapon. It does drop from Master Gi at a 33.3% rate, and it does come in all elements. Now, the Patriot has high base damage and worse everything else, including bullet speed and accuracy. So like I said, there's a lot of weapons like this in this game which have that trade-off. Now, the Patriot is one of the ones that's actually really good. People hate on this weapon a lot, but it's honestly an incredibly good weapon. Now, it's probably still the worst Vladof sniper, but that's just because Vladof snipers in general are really good. So being the worst of one of the best weapon classes this series has ever seen, it's still a good weapon. Now, it does outdamage the Lyuda on a single shot, unless the Lyuda lands any of the extra pellets. If the Lyuda lands all 3 extra pellets, it deals way more. If the Lyuda only lands 2 pellets, it still deals quite a bit more. But pellet for pellet, the Patriot does have more damage, although obviously, you know, the Lyuda is still much better overall. But this is one thing, like, people will hate on weapons like this. It's one thing to say that, like, it's not as good as it should be, or that you don't like it when the Lyuda exists, but saying that it sucks and it's non-viable is just not true. It's objectively a powerful weapon, guys. And like I said, I'm not saying, like, everything is flawless about this game. I'm just saying people significantly underestimate weapon viability. The Patriot is an objectively strong weapon. Now, again, I do think it should be stronger for being locked behind Master Gi. Well, I think like the base damage should be even higher. I think the idea of having, you know, high base damage and worse everything else is a cool idea for Vladof Sniper. They just didn't make the base damage high enough. So in my opinion, it should be much, much higher than it is. But that said, it's still an amazing weapon. It'll still melt enemies really quickly. So the Patriot honestly does deserve A tier. All right, baby. Up next, we got the Peak Opener. Opener, I hardly know her. So the Peak Opener does drop from Hatterax at a 33% rate. Now, it is shock locked, except the child grenades are explosive. So the main projectiles deal 300% pure splash, while the child rounds deal 100% grenade splash. So it's a massively, massively power crept Kerblaster. It's like 2 or 3 tiers better than the Kerblaster. It's so much better. The only downside is ammo consumption, because it does blow through ammo. When you ADS, you get plus 90% fire rate. And if I didn't mention it, you shoot it and on impact it explodes and drops 3 child grenades. So crazy good. Now, when you use the easy mode shield on Digistruct Peak, you deal plus 100% damage with the Peak Opener. Now, while the hard carry exists in the current session, including in inventory or on the ground on any map, and the easy mode shield is equipped on Digistruct Peak, you gain plus 100% health and 50 seconds and fight for your life. If the hard carry is equipped, you gain these bonuses twice. So I didn't actually realize that, but that's what Loot Limit displays it as. So that is actually really interesting. Now, the Peak Opener is arguably the best mobbing weapon in the game, because like other weapons like the Lead Storm deal the same damage, but like the lead or similar amount of damage, but like the Lead Storm has the sweet spot, right? The Peak Opener deals crazy damage, no sweet spot necessary, you know? You just aim, barely even have to aim, just shoot and just destroy everything. Now, that does come at the cost of horrible ammo consumption, but you know, you're killing everything, so who gives a shit? Now, you can stop shooting early to let the child grenades finish the enemies off, although that obviously comes at the cost of killing them a little bit slower, and you know, you'll have to deal with them being a threat for a little bit longer. So its only weakness is raid bossing. It actually does good damage in raid bossing, but it just blows through ammo too quickly. However, it's amazing for Digistruct Peak, and it does have applications in raid bossing. You can use it to get second wins or clear out mobs really easily. So I'm going to let it get SS tier because of the Digistruct Peak synergy. Digistruct Peak is one of the hardest parts of the game, so having that extra synergy there is really nice. I highly recommend checking out my Digistruct Peak guide if you're climbing the peak. This weapon is one of the best things you can do for yourself to climb the peak with. So considering how good it is at bossing and mobbing and the Digistruct Peak niche, I do think the Peak Opener deserves SS tier. One of the best weapons in the game. Now, speaking of one of the best weapons in the game, baby, oh, it's the Pimpernel, baby. Oh, God, it's the Pimpernel. So don't copy that floppy. That's the quest in Captain Scarlet DLC that rewards this weapon. So the Pimpernel shoots a round that spawns an additional round that rises into the air, then splits into 5 more bullets in a blooming pattern. Now, these bullets can hit enemies twice, but the second hit deals 50% less damage. So the Pimpernel also has plus 50% gun splash. Now, the Slag Pimpernel, you guys know I love my Slag Pimpernel. It is the best slag tool in the game, in my opinion. It's so good at stripping shields. That's kind of another weakness of Shock that I think people kind of don't think about. In general, you're probably using a Slag Pimpernel or a Slagga or maybe like a Florentine anyway, and those are going to eliminate shields really quickly while they're slagging. So that's kind of another reason that I don't consider Shock to be a great element. But you know, the Slag Pimp, it'll delete shields instantly. It's excellent at dealing with hard to crit enemies, which most snipers aren't, right? It's an amazing board tool. It's amazing for chain reaction on Maya. Great for mobbing, great for bossing. You can use it for raid bossing. If you removed it from the game, it would be one of the hardest weapons to replace, right? Now, it does also have Unlisted Projectiles for B abuse. All of these things, it's the best weapon in the game, in my opinion. One of the best weapons in the entire franchise. It's always hard to compare weapon to game because each game has different difficulty. Borderlands 2 is by far the hardest Borderlands game, and the Pimpernel is, in my opinion, the best weapon in Borderlands 2 at least. It only has the downside that you have to learn to sweet spot with it. It won't feel that good. I mean, it'll still be good, but to get all of that out of it, yeah, you need to be able to sweet spot with it. It's not that hard to get good at it, though. So it just has everything going for it. And like I said, if you removed the Pimpernel from the game, it would be one of the most disrupting weapons to be gone, because especially for Sniper Zero, it's so good for those enemies that are hard to crit. Because normally if you're playing Sniper Zero and there is a hard to crit enemy, it's just a pain in the ass to deal with. Well, the Pimpernel eliminates that. Like I said, amazing for board, amazing chain reaction, best slag tool. It's just got too much going for it. Pimpernel, easy SS tier. In my opinion, the best weapon in the entire game. All right, baby. Up next is the Pitchfork. So this does drop from Terramorphous at a 2.86% rate. It also drops from Master Yi at a 1.7% rate, and it does world drop. Now, the Pitchfork does come in all elements. It shots a row of 5 bullets. Loot Lemon has a typo. It says shots instead of shoots. What a bunch of morons. They made a mistake. They made a typo. What an unforgivable crime. They should... That's a joke. I'm not calling for anyone's death. All right, so the Pitchfork is amazing, though. It's got Unlisted Projectiles for B abuse. Guys, it's an absurd DPS monster. Absurd. But it does burn through ammo. Normally, I don't penalize weapons for going through a lot of ammo unless it's really severe. For the Pitchfork, it is really severe. Now, you can descope early to save ammo, but even still, it's going to run out fast. For mobs that are really small, like I wouldn't use it. It would still do good damage, but you're just going to run out of ammo too fast. For bigger mobs, like loaders and stuff, it'll still do really good. It is comical how easily the Pitchfork destroys bigger bosses like Snowman and like Wilhelm. It just melts them in seconds. It's insane. So anything wide enough to land all those shots on, it's fucking cartoonishly strong. It can be used for raid bossing, actually. Like, you can kill Hatterax with it. I've used it to beat the dragons. I've got a video farming the dragons with, like, a bunch of different setups I used it in. It's got everything going for it. Like, it would be S tier or even SS tier if not for the horrible ammo inefficiency. Like I said, I usually don't punish weapons for ammo inefficiency because ammo vendors and ammo crates are abundant in this game. But the Pitchfork is one where, like, the ammo limitation does hold it back significantly. So I do have to make it... I think I'm going to go S tier. Like A tier, it just deals too much damage. It deals way too much damage just to be A tier. And the thing is, during normal gameplay, you have access. That's another reason I don't care about ammo inefficiency that bad. During normal gameplay, you have multiple weapon types. You know, you don't have to run through a whole area with one weapon. So if you're playing the game normally, let's say, you know, you're beating the Snowman DLC, here's the Snowman. You can instantly melt him with a Pitchfork, and then you can farm him. And each time you farm him, you can repurchase ammo, right? Or, you know, you get up to Wilhelm, you can kill him easily. Let's say you're fighting the warrior. You couldn't kill the warrior. You would run out of ammo before you killed the warrior, but you could still dump all the rounds into him to deal significant damage and then swap to another weapon type. So overall, I'm going to give it S tier. It would be SS tier, but it does lose a tier for the horrible ammo inefficiency. But damage-wise, it's one of the top DPS weapons in the entire game. When you can land all 8 projectiles, it's probably like a top 3. Like, it's crazy good when you can do that. But yeah, overall, I am going to punish it a tier for the ammo inefficiency, but it's honestly an S tier weapon. Are you happy to see me, or is that just the pocket rocket you got there? So the pocket rocket does drop from the Torg vendor at a 13.41% rate, or it's obtainable there. I don't know if you call that dropping. I guess in universe it would drop, right? Wait, how did the physics of the Torg vendors work? Do they? Okay, never mind. Never mind. This video's too long. Let's not make dumb jokes. Okay, so the pocket rocket has plus 100% grenade splash. Now, Pequod Best Boy has asked me to review this weapon a lot, so here you go, Pequod. Also, Pequod is currently Pequod Best Boy. Sometimes Pequod misbehaves and becomes mid-quad mid-boy. Right now, he's fine, though. All right, so I'm personally not a big fan of the pocket rocket, but it's performed decently well at mobbing. It's definitely not a bosser, and it's got slow-moving projectiles being a torque pistol, which is kind of annoying. This might be disappointing to people. I honestly think it just deserves C tier. It's just like it can be good, but I just don't think the damage is good enough for the slow moving projectiles and stuff to be worth it. So in my opinion, the pocket rocket is going to be a C tier weapon. I mean, you could argue B tier. I was leaning towards B tier. I think the community poll was C tier. I think C tier is fair, but I wouldn't call you crazy if you ranked it in B tier. All right, and here is the updated tier list. As you can see, we are getting very massive at this point, so we might have to start using 2 screenshots to handle this girthy boy. If you hadn't noticed, the backgrounds are color-coded to the rarity, which will help you track what you're looking for if you're looking for a particular weapon. All right, there's the updated tier list, and now we will head on to the next weapon. So coming up next, we have the legendary Maliwan rocket launcher, the Pyrophobia. So Clark in the Hallowed Hollow does drop this at a 33% rate. Incinerator Clayton drops it at 10%, and Tiberius drops it at 0.29%. Now, the Pyrophobia is shockingly fire-locked, and it fires a rocket that explodes on impact and every 0.3 seconds while airborne. The explosions deal 75% fire rocket damage and 20% fire grenade damage. It's a pretty fun weapon. I do like the Pyrophobia a lot, although it's definitely off meta. If you can bunch enemies up, you can deal a lot of damage at once, which is nice, kind of like the Kerlaster. Now, do not increase the projectile speed with this because that will mean fewer Novas actually land, you know what I mean? So the Maliwan Grip is okay. The Maliwan Grip does not increase projectile speed. However, the Maliwan Sight does, the Maliwan Exhaust does, as do the Rocket Speed accessory and the Accuracy accessory. So avoid the pertinent and the punitory prefixes. Now, you will also want to avoid walking forward as you shoot, because you can down yourself. Now, guys, I'm going to link to BL2 parts in the description. You can see the visuals and the stats of all weapon parts in BL2 parts. So the Pyrophobia is decent for large bosses or large groups of enemies, but ultimately it's kind of underwhelming. It's another weapon that straddles the B tier, C tier line. The community poll is close, but they landed on B. I'm also going to go B tier. It does only consume 1 ammo per shot, which is nice. I think overall it does deserve B tier. All right, up next we have the Rapier. So you get this for completing the Message in a Bottle and Hater's Folly. Now, the Rapier is obviously a meta melee weapon. It does grant plus 200% melee damage, but you also take increased melee damage while using it. I've heard you take double damage, but Lululemon doesn't specify. Now, it's one of the few weapons that makes use of the second accessory slot. The first is always the bayonet. It can actually have 2 accessories. I think the only other, I don't know if there's another weapon that does that. I know in the pre-sequel, the second accessory slot is what the Loonshines were put on, and apparently that ended up becoming anointments. But yeah, interestingly, it can have multiple accessory. Like I said, it'll always have the unique bayonet, and then it can have another one. Now, as a gun, it's terrible. It's really, really bad as a regular gun. Now, obviously, as a melee weapon, it's meta. It's the best melee weapon. So, considering that melee utility, it has to be SS tier, right? Because one criteria for SS tier is that you can be good. You have to provide some unmatched level of utility, and the Rapier absolutely does that. Now, as a regular gun, the Rapier is like D tier or like C tier at best. Because I am considering utility though, and considering it does have, you know, the maximum amount of melee damage, it does earn SS tier. All right, up next is the Retcher. So Hyperius drops this at a 33.3% rate. The Retcher is corrosive locked, of course, and it does deal Pure Splash. It's actually not terrible, although, I mean, it's not incredible, but it's nowhere near as bad as people say. Now, it does really need the vertical grip, of course, because again, it's another shotgun, which will go from 1 projectile to 3 projectiles with the vertical grip, so you have to have that. But honestly, it deserves B tier. Like, Zero is pretty good with it. I assume Krieg would be really good with it because it does deal Pure Splash. So honestly, if you get it with the vertical grip, I would say it outperforms C tier. I would say it does deserve B tier, surprisingly. I mean, I'm not sure if I show Zero on the gameplay for the B-roll, but like he's really good with it. It's pretty good on other characters. I mean, I do ultimately think B tier is fair for it, honestly. All right, up next is the Rex. So you get this from Bolstos in Hunter's Grotto at a 33% rate. He drops it at a 33% rate. It does have plus 50% critical damage. Now, it's another one of those high damage but low stats everywhere else, but the damage isn't high enough to make up for the downsides, you know? Beautiful weapon skin, though. So I do like to use it with a Sheriff's Badge, and it's surprisingly good with it, in that setup. I do really like Axton's Duty Call skill with this, as it'll increase, it'll increase damage and fire rate, which helps these types of weapons a lot. Like I said, it can be surprisingly good, definitely the best on Zero with like Two Fang and stuff. Now, when you're fighting loaders, like the double accessory is pretty good. Overall, I think it's a C tier weapon. It can perform, I think, a little bit better than people would expect, but it needs pretty specific scenarios or a lot of support. But overall, I think C tier is fair for the Rex. Up next is the Roaster. So this is a quest reward for completing Note for Self Person. That's a quest in the fridge. So the Roaster does come in all elements. Compared to the non-unique version, it has increased elemental chance, status effect damage, and accuracy with slightly decreased damage. But, you know, that said, it's still pretty good. Bandit rocket launchers in general are excellent. It's got good damage per shot. It only consumes 1 ammo per shot and a big magazine. Honestly, it deserves A tier. Not a lot to say about it other than that. All right. Same kind of thing with this next weapon, the Rock Salt. So this is a quest reward for completing Splinter Group in the Bloodshot Stronghold, which I think Tennis gives that to you. Now, the Rock Salt does come in all elements. Compared to the non-unique, it has increased reload speed, accuracy, damage, and fire rate. Bandit shotguns in general are super good, guys. I've been talking about that. It deserves A tier as well. People might not think that. People might not expect it to be that good, but honestly, the Roaster and the Rock Salt are just straightforward, standard weapons, good weapons, A tier weapons. All right, up next is going to be the Ruby. So this is a quest reward for completing Rackaholics Anonymous. You have to side with Moxie. Now, if you want to read-only farm this quest, be careful. Make sure you don't progress too far like I accidentally did during my live stream. The Ruby does come in all elements, and it has the highest lifesteal in the game other than the Grog Nozzle at 12%. It's also got plus 80% Grenade Splash. So it is the best Moxie weapon you can get permanently, unless you were playing back in the day when you could farm a Grog Nozzle during the loot hunt or whatever. But honestly, guys, the Ruby is good enough. You really don't need the Grog. Anything, like even Melee Zero, who people often say needs a Grog Nozzle, doesn't. Like a Ruby is just fine for Melee Zero. But the only thing I can think of is obviously the Drunk Effect. Obviously, if you want to use the Drunk Effect, you can't use the Ruby. Maybe Veracitus and Hyperius, you would need the Grog Nozzle for. Even them, I feel like should be doable without it, but I would recommend, those fights are so dumb, I would recommend just taking, at least Veracitus, I would recommend taking every advantage you can. But it's great for Melee Zero. You can get a slag bladed version permanently. As a regular weapon, it's not amazing, but it was better than I expected. But considering the decent performance as a regular weapon, the great utility, the healing, I think it does deserve low A tier. All right, up next is the Sandhawk. So you get this in the Captain Scarlet DLC. The quest is called Whoops. Now, the Sandhawk does come in all elements. Now, it has unlisted projectiles for bee abuse. It's got 8 unlisted, to be exact, that fly in the shape of an actual physical Sandhawk of a bird flapping its wings. So it's obviously amazing with the bee shield. But honestly, guys, the Sandhawk is amazing without the bee too. Even without the bee, it's one of the highest DPS SMGs in the game. And for mobbing, it's going to kill mobs so quickly that using the bee shield is just tanking your survivability for a negligible damage bonus, I would recommend trying it without the bee shield if you want to, actually be able to tank a few hits. Obviously, for raiding, it's really, really good with the bee shield. Now, you don't even really need the flying prefix, guys. I mean, that's the best, but depending on the situation, Zero and Maya can boost projectile speed. Maya can just hold the enemies still. If you're using it for raid bossing, most raid bosses are either really big or really slow, so you don't need the flying prefix. For loaders, you wouldn't need it. I guess if you're trying to mob with Axton, it could be a little annoying if you don't have a flying prefix, depending on the enemy. But overall, it can get by without it. It's just a really good weapon. Good for mobbing, good for bossing, good for raid bossing. One of the best weapons in the game. Easily an SS tier weapon. All right, up next is the Sawbar. So the binary boss does drop it at a 12.5%. Tubbies drop it at a 1.67% rate. Loot midgets drop it at a 0.337% rate. Now, the Sawbar is fire locked. It fires bullets that spawn 3 extra bullets after 0.15 seconds. It's got plus 100% gun splash, which is amazing on Maya with Reaper. I love this with the legendary binder build on Maya for a subsequence build. It's so ridiculously good. It's got incredible DPS if you sweet spot with it. Maya can hold the enemy still to easily do so. It's also got unlisted projectiles for bee abuse. It's another very, very good pearlescent. Like I said, guys, a lot of these pearlescents are better than people tend to think. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Now, you do want to avoid increasing projectile speed. I don't like the wild accessory for this. I do like the damage clamp, which is the nasty prefix. And I'm not the best at sweet spotting with it, which is why I like it on Maya, because she can just hold enemies still. You can absolutely use it on other characters. Honestly, the sweet spot damage is S tier. I think I'm going to have to give it A tier simply because if you don't sweet spot with it, the damage is going to drop off a bit, or quite a bit. But it does have S tier damage potential. So overall, the Sawbar is going to get A tier. All right, up next is the Scorpio. So you do get this from the Bear of Bad News quest after Roland dies. Spoiler alert. Now, the Scorpio does come in all elements. It fires a 5-round burst. It has a 30% chance to fire twice. It's a pretty underwhelming weapon. It's not great. Definitely below average. Roland deserved better. C tier. All right, up next is the Seeker. So you do get this from the Flame Rock Refuge Seraphender. The Seeker does shoot homing bullets that deal pure splash. It's pretty bad, but, it's salvageable. Krieg, again, can be really strong with anything that deals pure splash. I think the Seeker is explosive, or I think Krieg has explosive skills too, so I'm sure that helps. Probably Krieg players are hopping up the Kerblaster too. That's just occurred to me. I assume the Kerblaster is really good on Krieg. But the Seeker can actually be really good on him. I guess with Max Anarchy Gauge, it could be good because they would still seek into targets. I don't know for sure. I don't think it can critically hit. Even on Zero with a Chaotic Neutral Rogue and Max 2-Fang, it was underwhelming, which that's genuinely impressive. To do that setup on Zero and still be below average is crazy. So Seeker, definitely a C tier weapon. Just good enough to avoid D tier. All right, up next is the Seraphim. So Master Gi does drop this at a 0.5% rate. It is also obtainable from the Oasis Seraph shop. Now the Seraphim is fire-locked. It does shoot slow-moving bullets in a 3-round burst. I find that the Feral prefix or Wild clamp have too much recoil. I do prefer the damage clamp, which is the attack prefix. I think some people prefer the Jacob's grip on this. Jacob's grip and Dahl both be good. I probably would take Jacob's grip as well, yeah. It's a pretty good weapon. I was going to say A tier. I think it's just, after more playtesting, I think it's a little too lacking to be A tier. I mean, I don't think it would be crazy to put it in A tier, but considering the slow-moving bullets and stuff, I do think overall it's a B tier weapon. Like I said, you wouldn't be crazy to put it in A tier, though. All right, up next is the Shotgun 1340. So this is a quest reward for completing out-of-body experience in the Bloodshot Stronghold. Now, the Shotgun 1340 does talk while wielding. I think it's identical to a blue Hyperion shotgun, but it is massively nerfed by the lack of element. It's only non-elemental. As much as element haters will say it's not like a big deal, it is a huge deal that this thing cannot have an element. That honestly makes it C tier. I guess you could argue the damage and range are good enough to be like low B tier, but I honestly think it's a C tier weapon. All right, up next is the Shred-a-Fire. So Hyperius does drop this at a 1.95% rate, and it also world drops. Now, the Shred-a-Fire has a very fast wind-up time. You know, with these types of weapons, they have to spin up. It's got a very fast spin. It does come in all elements. Honestly, the Shred-a-Fire is pretty underrated. For a lot of assault rifles, I just don't like the Wild Clamp, though, because it's got so much spread. Unless, like, fighting loaders, I would usually go Damage Clamp. It's a pretty good weapon, though. Like, honestly, it is. It's not amazing. I would say it's a solid B tier weapon, but like on Zero in particular, it's amazing. Yeah, solid B tier weapon. All right, up next is the Skull Masher. So Son of Mothrak and Rakanoth both drop this at a 5% rate, and it also world drops. So the Skull Masher does shoot 5 projectiles in a narrow spread. Now, it's a bit of a weird sniper because it hits really hard, but it's got poor range. Unfortunately, the Amigo Sincero does out damage it even if you land every projectile. But if you do land every projectile, the Skull Masher is pretty close to the Amigo Sincero, which is amazing, right? Anything that can almost go shot for shot with the Amigo Sincero is obviously amazing. It's kind of a hard weapon to rank for that reason. Like most snipers, again, they have the advantage of the better range, but this one doesn't have that. The recoil is pretty severe as well. Now, if you've only played this on Zero, it's going to feel incredible because precision is so good for this weapon because it'll tighten the spread a lot. Then obviously, he's just good with snipers in general. On Zero, it's an S tier weapon easily. Overall, I would say, considering the damage and the kind of worse range, I do think it still deserves to be A tier, though. It's definitely still a good weapon. All right, and up next is the Slagga. So you get this from Hector Hodunk at the end of the Clan Wars questline. He drops it at a 10% rate. The Sorcerer's Daughter drops it at a 1.95% rate, and it does world drop. Now, the Slagga is always slag. It's one of the best slag tools, although I personally prefer the Slag Pimpernel because it's much better at long range. But the Slagga is arguably equal to it. I guess like the main benefit to the Slagga is it's got a faster swap speed. Also, if you're not playing Zero, there's more of an argument for the Slagga. It's really good, though. Now, the Malawan grip does have slightly better slag chance overall, but I prefer the Bandit grip just for the matching grip bonus. Now, it shoots 3 bullets for 1 ammo, and Loot Lemon says it has increased fire rate, magazine size, and status effect chance compared to the non-unique. So, the damage, honestly, like even as a standard damage dealer, the Slagga is pretty good. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's pretty good. I would say it deals enough damage to be a good shield stripper. That's kind of another downside to Shock, is like you're already having to use a weapon to slag most of the time, and like a weapon like the Slagga is just going to strip a shield really quickly. And also remember, slag on slag is a 50% damage bonus, and very few enemies resist slag. So honestly, I think considering the decent damage and one of the best slag tools, it deserves A tier. All right, up next is a personal favorite, Sledge's Shotgun, baby. This thing is such a beast. So like I said, man, all bandit shotguns pretty much are good. This drops from Smash Head at a 10% rate, the Golden Golem at a 1.95% rate, Hyperius at a 1.67% rate, and it does also world drop. So it shoots a 2-round burst with a delay between each shot. Now, it does not have the knockback effect that it got for Borderlands 1. This is a weapon that gets a ton of hate, but it's a very strong weapon, objectively. There's a difference between disliking a weapon and like saying a weapon sucks, and sometimes I think people don't make that distinction. Well, I'm going to talk about that a lot when we get to the Stalker. That's something I want to be clear about. Like, a lot of the issues with people saying things like that is they'll say a weapon is bad when really they mean they personally dislike it. But when other people hear that, they think it means that it is objectively bad. So obviously, Violent Puma said that the Sledge's Shotgun was the worst legendary in the game or something crazy like that. And this community has a problem where like a lot of the most popular content creators will shit on good weapons, and then their viewers just kind of take it as gospel, and then they shit on the weapon. So like you have this community where like there's a lot of powerful weapons, but everyone says they all suck. But you can see from the footage on screen if you are, able to watch it, which again, a lot of people apparently aren't. The Sledge's Shotgun is a beast. I can understand disliking it, but objectively, it's a powerful weapon. So it honestly deserves A tier. I mean, almost S tier. I'm going to hold it back from S tier because of the delay between the shots. But like, if you have fire rate bonuses, like Maya with the subsequence build can bypass that, Axton can bypass that, Zero can bypass that. It's honestly at least an A tier weapon. All right, up next is the Sloth. So you do get this from the Rackaholics Anonymous quest if you side with Mordecai. Now, the Sloth fires slow-moving bullets, but has a 70% more damage than a non-unique version. It honestly hits super hard. It's got a 3-round burst or a 4 with the Dahl stock. It does come in all elements. I find this to be a very underrated weapon. The community poll voted it B tier. It's definitely an A tier weapon. Like, the damage is just amazing. Zero and Maya can boost the projectile speed, or Maya can just hold the enemy still, or you can just, you know, fight loaders with it, or you can lead your targets. Personally, I don't feel that slow-moving projectiles is a good enough reason to downgrade it to B tier when the damage is this good, and there's so many ways to work around the slow-moving bullet. So, great damage, a little bit ammo inefficient, easy A tier. Again, snipers, great damage, great range. You cannot understate how important that great range is. Now, it's a little bit less so with the Sloth because of the slow-moving bullets, but you absolutely still can use it at range depending on, you know, the specific scenario. All right, up next is going to be the Slow Hand. So, Badassosaurus and Piston both drop this at a 30% rate. Now, the Slow Hand does come in every element, and it cannot be non-elemental. This is, again, another weapon you really want the vertical grip on it. 1 to 3. 3 is obviously a lot more than 1. Now, the Slow Hand also has 3.5% lifesteal. Now, some people like the Slag version for a Slag tool. It is decent, but it's definitely not my favorite. But I honestly think, like, the healing potential with a decent Slag tool, good damage, I honestly think it deserves A tier. It does deal Pure Splash and Gun Splash according to Demon Knight's Splash Guide. So overall, yeah, I think it deserves A tier. All right, up next is the Stalker. So the Stalker drops from the Binary Boss at a 12.5% rate, from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate, Loot Midgets at a 0.316% rate. Now, the Stalker does come in all elements, and the Stalker might be the single most underrated weapon in the entire game as far as how much people shit on it versus how it actually performs. People talk so much shit about the Stalker, but it is a top 5 DPS pistol in the entire game. And this is a case of, like, people don't just say, like, they personally dislike it. They don't just say, like, they hate how the bullets are slow moving. Like, the community, I've literally seen people say, like, it sucks damage-wise, and that if you, like, find it during a playthrough, you might as well throw it away. And that the only person to even think about using it on, the only character to think about using it with is Zero, since he has velocity to boost the projectile speed. But that's just silly. The Stalker is devastating on every character. It's probably the best on Zero, since he can increase the projectile speed. Because it does shoot slow-moving bullets that bounce 5 times. I'm not sure how it would be on Gage. I don't play Gage, so I don't know a ton about her. But with the 5 bounces, it could be good on her. But it's just a DPS monster, you know, great DPS, but, you know, it does shoot slow-moving bullets. It creates quite the light show. This is one of my favorite pistols just for that reason alone. The bounces can be nice with Boar as well. I like it on Maya as well, since she can just hold enemies still and she's got chain reaction with it and stuff. So they're just an amazing weapon. Just look at the gameplay. Look at how easily it's melting these enemies. And like understand this community is so egregiously uninformed and unskilled. It's essentially a crime. Look at how strong this thing is. Honestly, the Stalker deserves low S tier. I guess you could argue that the slow-moving bullets are just enough to knock it down to the top of A tier, but I've used it on Maya, Axton, and Zero, and it's just too good on all of them. Top 5 DPS pistol, I'm honestly going to give it S tier. All right, up next is going to be the Stinger. So this is similar to the Stalker, sort of. The Stinger does drop from the Ancient Dragons at a 33.3% rate. Now, it does come in every element. It's another very underrated weapon. The Stinger fires slow-moving projectiles that bounce once, and it does come in all elements. Now, people shit on the Stinger a lot too, but it doesn't make any sense because the same people who praise the Anarchist, which is one of the best weapons in the game, hate on the Stinger, even though statistically the Stinger and the Anarchist are identical. The only thing is a Garnet Anarchist will slightly outdamage the Stinger because the Gemstone Skin has the additional critical damage, right? But the Stinger is just an Anarchist that shoots slow-moving bullets that bounce once, right? So it's basically the Stinger is your ticket to easily farming an Anarchist. That's really all there is to it, you know? It's just an Anarchist that can't have the Gemstone Skin. But I mean, good luck getting a Garnet Anarchist. That's my channel name, and I don't even have one. It's a really good weapon, though. Like I said, technically the Garnet Anarchist is better because of the 7.5% critical damage and the damage reflection of the Gemstone Skin. In reality, it's just an easier to farm Anarchist, at least once you can beat the dragons. I would say it deserves a high A tier. Arguably low S tier. It does feel a little bit worse than the Stalker, so I'm going to give it a high A tier. All right, up next is the Stink Pot. So No Beard drops this at a 33% rate, and he does not respawn. Now, the Stink Pot is corrosive locked, and Elemental Jacobs. The Stink Pot deals Pure Splash. I think the projectiles can sometimes pass through enemies, although you can kind of adjust by aiming at their feet. I don't think this weapon feels very good to use. I was having a hard time deciding between B tier and C tier for this weapon. I think you can make arguments either way. The community poll was B tier, so I'll go ahead and honor that, but I think it could very easily be argued C tier. But like I said, the community poll is B tier, so I'll go ahead and put it in B tier. All right, up next is the Stomper. So this is a very, very bad weapon. You get it from the quest Hungry Like the Skag. It's the one where you have to assemble it, basically. Now, somehow it's got plus 50% crit damage, but you would never know it by using the weapon. It's so bad. There's not much to say other than it's very disappointing. I really wish that quest rewarded a better weapon, because like constructing together this weapon should have resulted in something much stronger, you know, easily a D tier weapon. All right, up next is the Storm. So this drops from the binary boss at a 12.5% rate, drops from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate, drops from Loot Midgets at a 0.304% rate, and it does World Drop. Now the Storm is shock locked. It creates visual shock novas on impact, and 5 Tesla orbs spawn around the impact zone. Each orb lasts 0.85 seconds and shocks enemies, dealing a massive 10% shock grenade splash damage 3 times. Now, the Storm is a weird one to rank because, like, it's not as terrible as people often say, but it's definitely not great. It's a pretty disappointing Pearl. It's very underwhelming. It is significantly worse than a standard Snider because of no element matching. It's a borderline low B, high C. In my Snipers tier list, I put it, I think, low B. Considering that other weapons that are in C tier are stuff like the Elephant Gun and the Buffalo, I mean, the Storm is better than them a little bit, I guess. I mean, the community poll was C tier, so this is one I'm having a very hard time on. I think for right now, I'm going to give the Storm B tier, but I don't really, you know, blame people for ranking it C tier. All right, up next is this Striker. So the Striker does drop from Old Slappy at a 10% rate, drops from Master Yi at a 1.7% rate, and it does World Drop. Now, the Striker has plus 50% critical hit damage, which is nice, although it doesn't hit super hard, but it has ridiculous range, especially on 0 with 10 points in precision. You can like snipe enemies with it, basically. It has such amazing range on him. I really like it on 0 because of his damage bonuses, too. Because like on other characters, the damage is a little underwhelming, but like on 0, it's got amazing range and amazing damage, so super good on him. Overall, I would say the Striker is a solid B tier weapon, though. All right, up next is the Sword Explosion. So you get this for completing the Sword and the Stoner quest. Again, another weapon you really want the vertical grip, 1 to 3. That's obviously a massive increase. Now, you can sort of sweet spot where you get like all the projectiles to break on an enemy. If you can do that, it deals massive damage. So when you shoot the initial projectile, it shoots a sword out that breaks and spawns 3 more. Or if you have, you know, the vertical grip, it shoots 3 and then makes 9. Now, the Unicorn Explosion is stronger, but also creates more visual pollution. But I'll talk about that when I get to it. So the thing is, I honestly think the Sword Explosion deserves S tier because it has great range for a shotgun, and it can match the damage of other top tier weapons without having to critically hit, you know, so I think that's a pretty big deal. So I can see some people thinking it should only be A tier, but I honestly feel like with the vertical grip, it is an S tier weapon considering the range. And again, the fact it doesn't have to get critical hits. It's very hard to keep a mental image of how a weapon performs across six characters for mobbing, bossing, raiding, utility. It's going to be very hard to make a list people will agree on. I actually don't even think it's possible. Honestly, I feel like I'm one of the most qualified people to make a list like this because just the amount of playtime I have on OP10, the amount of experimenting I've done with various weapons. Like I spend a lot of time playtesting, which frankly, a lot of people clearly don't. And just, I would say my overall skill level, I mean, I've got something like 20 world records. I think I probably am one of the most qualified people to make a list like this, even though obviously I'm not infallible. But I think it's looking pretty good so far. All right, up next is going to be the Tatler, baby. So this drops from Hyperius at a 33.3% rate. Now, that is the only drop source in Ultimate Ball Hunter mode. Now, the Tatler does have a fixed bayonet accessory, and it does come in all elements. So it's basically a power-crept Bone Shredder. The Bone Shredder was already really good, and the Tatler is just insane. It fires 3 bullets for 1 ammo. It has no multi-pellet damage reduction, but instead has reduced projectile speed, magazine size, and reload speed. Now, it's got genuinely insane DPS. It can easily kill OP10 enemies without slag, which is kind of crazy. Like, even a lot of, like, if you're playing base UVHM and, you know, you're a good player, you build well, you go for crits, you use elements. In base UVHM, you can get away without using slag a lot of the times. Even on OP10, when you're using like super meta stuff, you can get away without slagging like trash mobs. And like the Tatler can absolutely do that. So it's another like awkwardly classed weapon. It's basically a high fire rate, low damage per shot shotgun. Like that's the effective range. You want to use it in shotgun range. Easy S tier though. The only thing it lacks is raid boss potential. All right, up next is the Teapot. So you get this for completing your cordially invited Tea Party quest in Tundra Express. So the Teapot is corrosive locked. It does deal plus 80% grenade splash, and it's basically a downgraded Hornet. Now, the community poll is B tier, and I think that's fair. I almost want to say you could argue the Teapot is A tier with the double accessory. Like I said, guys, doing so much playtesting, I really realized that for loaders specifically, the double accessory is so good. And like on Maya, Axton, and Zero, I was getting such good performance with the teapot with the double accessory that I almost wanted to call it A tier. But maybe those characters are all just really good with it. The community poll, I conducted multiple community polls and it got B tier like every time. So I'll honor the community poll. But honestly, I almost feel like it could be A tier with the double accessory. All right, up next is the Teeth of Terramorphous, baby. Oh, I love the shotgun so much. If you've seen my top 10 underrated weapons video, this was number 1. Like, it gets so much hate, and it's very good. I mean, it's not meta, but it's so good. Like, people shit on it so much, and the damage is actually really good. So, it drops from Terramorphous, shockingly, at a 2.86% rate. Now it is fire locked. So what the Teeth of Terramorphous does is it shoots like 2 rows of 6 projectiles that form a biting pattern. They collapse in on each other and they cause explosions, fire explosions. Now, according to Demon Knight's Splash Guide, it deals plus 50% grenade splash initially and plus 180% when the projectiles converge. Like I said, it's a very underrated weapon. Now, it does have a bit of a learning curve. There's a sort of specific range and specific way you need to use it to get the most out of it. But it also massively benefits from fire rate bonuses. That's like the #1 thing it needs to get going is a good fire rate. Now, you can sweet spot with it by trying to get the teeth to converge, but I find like I like just using it at point blank range. It honestly does deserve A tier for how good it is on multiple different characters. Like, it's got the grenade splash to be really consistent with Axton. The only single thing it needs is like a little bit of fire rate to get going. Super good with Zero with Two Fang. Like, it deals massive damage considering it's only 1 ammo per shot, you know, so it can have great single shot damage, and it can be a sustained weapon where it shoots over and over because it's got a big magazine size and only consumes 1 ammo per shot. I think Alpha has told me that proportionally, the Teeth of Terramorphous has the highest damage considering it only consumes 1 ammo per shot if you look at like the whole ammo pool, you know. So overall, I do think it's good and consistent enough to be A tier. Since it does have the grenade splash, you can get away with like body shots if you have a target that's harder to crit, you know. But yeah, I really like it on Zero with Two Fang, like I said. Maya with the subsequence build. Axton, once he gets his kill skills going, it's so good with it. So overall, Teeth of Terramorphous, an A tier weapon. I believe it actually might have been my first ever weapon review. All right, up next is the Thunderball Fist. So this does drop from Captain Flint and Sparky Flint at a 5% rate, and it also world drops. So shockingly, the Thunderball Fist is shock locked. It does have plus 100% grenade splash, while the Orb has plus 150% pure splash. Now, the Thunderball Fist is pretty good. I'm just not a big fan of it. I don't really like how it handles. I just find it awkward and inconsistent. It may just be a skill issue on my part, but like I've watched a lot of other footage from it. And again, this is another one that I conducted multiple community polls on, and they were mostly B tier. Some people were voting A tier, but overall it did earn B tier. And I think that's fair. It's a good weapon, like I said, but I do think overall it's a B tier weapon. All right, up next is the Tidal Wave. So you get this for completing the Uncle Teddy side quest in the Badlands. You have to side against Teddy, though, and the Lady Fist to get the Tidal Wave. Now, the Tidal Wave shoots piercing bullets in a wave that bounce 3 times. Now, it can actually be really good against wider enemies, like it melts loaders. On Zero, it's amazing. It feels so good on Zero, easily A tier. But I noticed it dropped off really hard depending on the character. It also has a bit of a learning curve. Like, if you aren't careful, the shots will just sort of like curve over the enemy. It's hard to rank because of how inconsistent it feels. On Zero, it's definitely A tier. Overall, it's probably B or even C tier. I was kind of conflicted between those two. C tier is not unreasonable for this weapon. The community poll was B tier, so I guess I'll honor that, but I do think you could argue C tier. Considering how good it can feel on Zero, I guess you could say B tier is reasonable, so I don't want to weigh any one character too much, though. But, you know, the community poll was also B tier, so I'll go with that. Like I said, I don't think C tier would be unreasonable. All right, up next is the Tinderbox. So this drops from Captain Flint. He's guaranteed to drop it. Sparky Flint has a 33% chance to drop it. You can also get it from the Snowman's Head in the Tundra Express during the Train to Catch mission, if you shoot the Snowman's Head. So it's obviously fire locked, and it deals plus 100% grenade splash. Now, the visual pollution plus the slow-moving projectiles makes this weapon kind of unwieldy. It can be kind of hard to hit enemies while they're moving. I don't really like how it feels, but it can perform surprisingly well. I think B tier is fair for the Tinderbox. All right, up next is the Toothpick. So Sandworms drop this at a 2% rate, while the Sandworm Queen drops it at a 20% rate. So the Toothpick is fire locked. It does have Unlisted Projectiles for B abuse. It fires 10 projectiles in 2 rows of 5. Now, when used with the Mouthwash Relic, it gains plus 200% damage. Now, when used with the Retainer versus Hatteraxe, you gain massively increased movement speed and jump speed. So it's really good for Hatteraxe. It's very strong against wider targets. It is a massive shame this thing cannot be corrosive because it would be great for loaders. It's a very, very strong weapon. I don't really like how it feels, though. Considering the damage potential, the B abuse, the fact that it's got the utility with Hatteraxe, it's got both the movement and the mouthwash bonus. I think Rokar told me that if you're using this in Hatteraxe's arena and melee with it, I think it'll heal you, weirdly enough. So, like for regular mobbing, it can feel kind of bad. because if the mob is too small to land all the projectiles on, it just feels kind of bad because it doesn't do a ton of damage, and then like it can fire through the magazine really fast. Like magazine size bonuses are really good for this. Like Axton's overload makes this weapon feel a lot better. I don't think it deserves SS tier, but I do think it overall has too much going for it. I do think it has to be S tier, even though I'm not like a huge fan of it personally. Again, I really wish it could be corrosive because it would be so good for loaders. All right, up next we have the Trespasser. So you do get this for completing the animal rights quest from Mordecai and Sanctuary. Now the Trespasser does ignore shields, which is good for Pete and Veracitus. It's otherwise a very weak and unremarkable weapon. It was obviously power crept by the Amigo Sincero. I will give it high C tier since it does have some raid boss utility, but overall it's a quite bad weapon. All right, up next is the Triquetra. So you get this for the Clan Wars end of the Rainbow quest. Now the Triquetra forms a Triquetra shape when you shoot it, which is the symbol on the weapon. It's pretty good, but I do feel like it's a bit behind like other top tier Jacob shotguns. So I think ultimately it deserves to be B tier. Not a lot to say about it. All right, up next is the Tunguska. So this does drop from the binary boss at a 12.5% rate. Tubbies at a 1.67% rate, and Loot Midgets at a 0.219% rate. So it does shoot an arcing projectile that rises into the air and explodes. Now the damage is actually decent. The blast radius is absurd. Like it's so easy to kill yourself, way too easy to kill yourself. If you actually take advantage of the blast radius, the DPS against groups is really good. It does consume 2 ammo per shot, which hurts it a lot though. It's definitely underwhelming for being a pearlescent. It's not as bad as people say though. It probably deserves B tier. Now some people were saying it's a little bit worse than a purple Torg launcher, but guys, you gotta remember you're ranking the weapons against all weapons in general. It's not really fair to artificially lower a weapon's ranking just because it's worse than its non-unique, right? Because you could have weapon A and weapon B, which have very different strength in their non-uniques, and then even though maybe weapon B is better than its non-unique, but weapon A is worse. It really just depends on comparing them together. Non-unique Torg launchers are some of the best launchers in the game, so I don't really personally see that as a legitimate reason to lower the damage. You know what I mean? Hopefully I explained that right. But the community poll was C tier. I do think that's fair because it is easy to kill yourself with. You could also definitely argue B tier again because of how much damage it can do to groups of enemies. I will honor the community poll. I will put it in C tier because it does consume 2 ammo per shot. It is easy to kill yourself. But like I said, I think B tier would actually be reasonable. All right, up next is the Twister. So it does spawn from O. It drops from O at a 33% rate. Now, it is shock locked, obviously. Now, if you're farming O in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, like I keep saying, make sure to fast travel to Candlerak's Crag before spawning him, as this causes a bug where he gains a 50% chance to drop either a Hawkeye or an Interfacer. Now, it's an Elemental Jacobs, which is really nice. It's a Jacobs weapon you can use a Bone of the Ancients with. I consider the Bone of the Ancients to be the best item in the game, guys. If you're new to this game and you don't know it, once you get to Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, as soon as you can, farm a full set of the Bone of the Ancients. Fire, Shock, Corrosive. It gives you a massive damage bonus, and it gets you your action skill act faster. If you're struggling in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, that will genuinely make the game 50% easier. It does have plus 40% Grenade Splash. Now, the rounds also penetrate targets, so they will hit over and over as they keep spinning. And the splash does trigger on each hit as well. So it shoots in a Twister pattern where the rounds kind of spawn close together and fan out when you shoot. It's got a high learning curve, but it's devastating if you can consistently place your shots. It's a highly versatile weapon, great on Axton, Zero, Maya, Gage, pretty much everyone. I know like Chain Reaction Maya is really good with it. It's an easy A tier weapon. The main thing is the versatility, it's just got the Grenade Splash. It's got too much going for it, Easy A tier weapon. All right, up next is the Unforgiven. So this does drop from the binary boss at a 12.5% rate. Drops from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate. It drops from Loot Midgets at a 0.316% rate, and it does World Drop. Now, the Unforgiven does have plus 75% critical damage, although the fire rate is just god-awful. It's so bad. Now, the Unforgiven is not very good, guys. It's a little bit better than people give it credit for. Again, Axton with the double version with duty calls and a Sheriff's Badge can actually kill loaders really, really quickly, but that's obviously a hyper-specific situation. It still just doesn't have enough damage to make up for the downsides, so ultimately, the Unforgiven is a C-tier weapon. All right, up next is the Unicorn Explosion. So you obtain this by feeding Butt Stallion in the Commander Lilith DLC while wearing the Mysterious Amulet. This is the one you get in Dragon Keep. Now, you can only get 1 Unicorn Explosion per character, guys, not per playthrough, per character. So remember that. The Unicorn Explosion and the Sword Explosion have identical stats on the item cards, but the Unicorn Explosion has more splash damage. The Sword Explosion deals 100% gun splash on its main projectiles, 70% grenade splash on its child projectiles. Now, the Unicorn Explosion deals 150% gun splash on its main projectiles, and also 70% on the child projectiles. So the Unicorn should be a strict upgrade, but in reality, weirdly, they often perform very similarly. I'm wondering if maybe it's because the projectiles of the Unicorn Explosion are larger, so like maybe they don't always break together as easily. It could simply be that the projectile, the damage bonus only being on, you know, the main projectile is just not as much of a bonus as you would think. Let me know what you think about it. I've asked Rokar, and he said he also felt that it performed similarly to the Sword Explosion, so I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Either way, they're both really good. The Unicorn Explosion does create a lot more visual pollution, because the Sword Explosion shoots swords, the Unicorn shoots unicorns, obviously. So it's a really good weapon, though. You do want the vertical grip with it. Just like the Sword Explosion, it's an S tier weapon. Doesn't need crits to do great damage. All right, up next is the Unkempt Herald, baby. So this drops from Savage Lee at a 10% rate. He can actually spawn twice, which is nice. It also drops from Tord Vendors at a like 16.7% rate or something. It does also world drop. So for 3 ammo, it fires 1 bullet that spawns 6 extra bullets that fan out. So all the bullets explode on contact, dealing 100% grenade splash, while extra explosions deal 70% grenade splash. Now, it does have unlisted projectiles for B abuse. Now, most people prefer the double penetrating. Some prefer hard, which is damage. I like the double penetrating better. It's a very, very strong weapon, good for lots of different situations. One of the best weapons in the game. It's great for heal swapping, for raid bossing, or I mean just in general. It's good for Boar, probably Chain Reaction Maya, good for all kinds of stuff. One of the best weapons in the entire game. Obviously, the only kind of downside is it does shoot slower moving bullets. That might be kind of hard to crit the enemy depending on if they're moving a lot. But overall, it's just an amazing weapon. Even though like I'm not a huge fan of it personally, I can't deny that it's an amazing weapon. Easy SS tier. Up next is the Veritas. So you do get this for completing the Clan Wars Wakey Wakey quest. Now it's got plus 20% critical damage. And for every Veritas or Aquatis shield equipped in the group, you gain plus 10% fight for your life duration. It does also come in all elements. It's honestly a very underwhelming pistol. I didn't find it to be very good at all. I think the community polls were split between B tier and C tier. Now, I guess you could argue B tier since it does have the extra fight for your life duration. I kind of feel like it's more C tier, but I'll allow B tier for the Veritas. All right, up next is the Varuk. So Mobley drops the Varuk at a 10% rate in the Dust from the Good, the Bad, and the Mordecai quest. Sorcerer's Daughter also drops it at a 1.95% rate, and it does world drop. Now, the Varuk does come in all elements, and while scoped, it fires a horizontal 5-bullet row for 2 ammo, and sustained firing decreases the distance between the bullets. So it is really nice for loaders because of the firing pattern. Now, the Varuk is a pretty good weapon. Like, it's nothing crazy. I think we did multiple community polls, and they were split between A tier and B tier. The thing with the Varuk is, to me, I think it's a B tier weapon that's just really easy to support to A tier territory. So like, again, against loaders, it's super good because it can easily crit them, you know, all of their crit spots there. Like on Axton has overload to boost the magazine size, which makes it feel a lot better. Zero's just good with everything. Maya, like on Maya with the subsequence build with like a legendary binder, it's super, super good. Like overall, it often has A tier performance, but I do think it's more of just a B tier weapon that just happens to be really easy to support to A tier. I think I'm going to give it B tier, but I don't think A tier would be unreasonable. I just think overall it's more of a B tier weapon. All right, up next is the Volcano. So this does drop from the Warrior at a 1.25% rate. Now, I think it might be higher in the story kill. The Handsome Sorcerer drops it at a 4.13% rate, and it does world drop. Now, it is a fire locked, obviously. It's got plus 28% or plus 80% grenade splash. Now, the Volcano is generally a little worse than the Snider. It can be better on Krieg or Axton with the B shield. It really depends. It's also better on body shots. Now, the Snider has gun splash, which the Volcano loses in favor of grenade splash. In general, people do tend to prefer the Snider. Even on Axton, the Snider is often better. There's a lot of nuances. Sometimes the Volcano is better. It depends on a lot of different factors. In general, like I said, the Volcano is going to win on body shots or with the B shield. It is certainly disappointing for being a unique Snider, which is one of the best non-uniques. It's a borderline A tier, B tier weapon. Considering the range, again, I think I'm going to let the range be the deciding factor, allowing it to be A tier. I think the community polls were kind of split B tier and A tier. It's not an easy choice, but I think ultimately the additional range, the, you know, being better with the B shield, being better on body shots, you could definitely argue A tier for the Volcano. It just doesn't feel quite A tier for me, actually. So I'm going to go B tier for the Volcano, but you could definitely argue A tier. All right, up next is the Wanderlust. So this does drop from Tubbies at a 1.67% rate. It is shock locked and it deals pure splash. Now, the Wanderlust is a terrible fucking weapon, but like all weapons, it can be good when completely carried by a build. So, you know, Anarchy Gauge, it has the Seeking Projectiles. I'm sure it's good on her. Krieg can be good with anything that deals pure splash. Mr. TX01 has covered this on Krieg. I'll link to his video if you want to see how good Krieg can be with it. But in general, it's just so bad and unwieldy. It feels like it can dot the player if you shoot it at point blank. Is that what is happening in this footage? I have no idea if that's what's happening here. It's so unfun. It's so bad. It's easily D tier. And remember, D tier doesn't mean it's bad 100% of the time. It just means it's bad 99% of the time. And the Wanderlust absolutely is bad 99% of the time. All right, up next is the World Burn. So this drops from Lieutenant Bolson in the Commander Lilith DLC at a 20% rate. It is a power crept fire locked nukem. It's got a massive blast radius. It only consumes one ammo per shot. It is genuinely one of the best weapons in the game. A lot of people were underestimating this weapon in the community polls. It's so good. It is easy to kill yourself with the massive range if you're not careful. It's easily S tier though. Great damage per shot, massive magazine, massive blast radius, only consumes 1 ammo per shot. It can shoot like 6 or 7 times, in one magazine. It can kill One so quickly. It can kill One in 1 mag. I don't think I've ever killed One as quickly as I did with the World Burn. So super, super good. Easily S tier. Easily one of the best rocket launchers in the game. One of the best weapons in the game. All right. Finally, we have the Yellow Jacket. So this does drop from Jackenstein at a 33% rate. Now, it fires slow-moving projectiles that accelerate and become invisible. The projectiles bounce off the first surface they hit. Now, the Yellow Jacket is shock-locked, and it does deal plus 70% grenade splash. It is actually a good weapon. It's just very unwieldy. Obviously, Zero can boost the projectile speed with velocity. Maya can with accelerate. She can also just hold the enemy still. But it has A tier damage. It honestly does. But it's so unwieldy that overall, I think it does deserve B tier. All right, guys. And finally, we have the fully updated tier list here. So I'll have to show it in multiple sections because it's so big. Now, looking at this, I'm mostly happy with this. Honestly, I ended up doing so much testing, and I would retest the weapons and then move them around again, and I just kept doing that over and over. Eventually, I just had to reach a point where I stopped doing that. You could definitely argue some of these to be moved to different tiers. Like I said, there's a lot of subjectivity. I really don't want to rank them within the tiers, although I feel this is a general ranking in the tiers. That, again, that just gets into even more subjective territory, and it's super hard to rank them that way. Now, with the Varrook, the Seraphim, the Kerblaster, and the Hector's Paradise, I did do a last-minute poll, and I let people decide if they wanted them to be A tier or B tier, because I feel like they're borderline. They did vote on them mostly for them to be A tier, so I'm perfectly fine with the idea of the Varrook, Seraphim, Kerblaster, and Hector's Paradise being A tier. The reason that I'm criticizing the Hector's Paradise so much is because shock is just less efficient, guys. Like, I know on paper it seems like, oh, it's 250% against shields and 100% against everything else, but in reality, it's just worse than element matching. Like, if you look at Washburn Refinery, everyone here would rather just use Hornet there, and it would be much better. And Washburn Refinery is a microcosm of how the entire game works. You're just always better off to element match, especially, again, because you already have to slag, and good slag weapons like the Slag Pimpernel, Slaga, and Florentine will take a shield out really easily anyway. Now, I'm going to show some parts of the community poll here. Now, I'm going to link to this in the description if you want to check this out. Dizzy was very detailed with it, so thank you, Dizzy, for conducting the community polls. Like I said, I will link it in the description if you guys want to see that. I'll show some parts of it here, but if you want to see the full thing, you'll have to check the description. Now, guys, feel free to share your opinions and discuss in the comments. Just, you know, try to be respectful to each other and stuff. Like I said, there's just a lot of subjectivity, but I feel like this is a decent at-a-glance ranking, right? Now, I'm still going to be doing individual weapon reviews in the future. Like, this doesn't mean that I'm done with weapons. This is just, a video like this is an overview. Obviously, I can still make individual weapon reviews for many of these weapons and go more in depth and stuff like that. Obviously, I couldn't go into depth on this video because it's pushing 3 hours already. But this was a beast to make. This was super hard to make. It took a lot of work. I got a lot of help from the community though. Like I said, Dizzy, thank you for managing the community polls. Lots of people voted and gave their opinions. You know, thank you, Mr. TX01, Stereo Lotus, Croat, Alpha. So many people contributed. I really appreciate everyone who helped on the Discord. So, like I said, guys, check out the Gemstone Gang if you want to come hang out at the Discord. Just don't be an asshole. I'm going to try to get back to streaming again soon, and I've got some other big videos planned, but I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to show your support, like, comment, subscribe, maybe become a member. Veracity Slayers do get early access. And speaking of my members, thank you to my members. I really appreciate you guys, especially Severinfire, for being a Garnet Veracity Slayer. I really do appreciate the support, comrade. But there you go, guys. There's the final. There's the video. Such a beast to make. I'm gonna have timestamps everywhere, so like if obviously you probably won't be able to watch this video in one shot, but there's gonna be timestamps and everything. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Stay safe and be here next time.